Hello friends. Welcome once again to Akaza Fix. Today I bring you an incredible new theory. What if Deku could bring tattoos to life? Yes, not only his own, but everyone else's as well. Imagine creatures emerging from skin, markings gaining consciousness, and turning into living weapons. So get ready, because this story is about to get intense. Let's get into the video. Alright. He placed the cold, wet patch of paper onto his skin and pressed in there tightly for a few seconds. It was something he had done hundreds of times, an act that he had perfected, so much that he could do it flawlessly 10,000 times without a single slip-up. He peeled off the paper and examined his handiwork. You can do this. A small caricature of All Might rested on his arm for a few moments before it began to move around, still flexing and smiling like nothing was wrong in the world. A few seconds later, a small fiery endeavor had appeared and began to breathe fire at it. For once, would you two not? Izuku asked his Quirk. It happened every time he applied the cheap sticker tattoos he could pick up from the toy store for a yen. Endeavor would always try to start a fight with All Might, and the other pro heroes wouldn't help. Whoa, another UA applicant said. Another person that had come to the bathroom to prepare themselves for the practical exam. He had spiked red hair and just as red eyes, and had punched himself in the face the moment he walked into the bathroom. That's pretty wild, dude. Is that your Quirk? Yeah. Izuku nodded and gave a light smile. He summoned the stickered version of Endeavor, who gave a light pout at not being able to torment All Might anymore. I'm a living mural. Any art that gets put on my skin becomes alive, and I can summon them. And kind of control them. Whoa, that beats my hardening by a mile. The redhead held up his hand and turned his arm into a jagged rock-like substance that actually looked like it was hard, which was something that Izuku considered pretty useful. But, why are you just putting on those sticker tattoos? Wouldn't you be better off with something manly? Like an actual tattoo of like a tiger or a shark. Something manly. Leave it to a stranger to start pouring salt on an old wound that never stopped festering. You're right. I'd love to get an actual tattoo. My Quirk is stronger the larger and more detailed something is. He felt like it actually being permanent would help a lot too, but he hadn't had the ability to actually prove that yet. But it's my mom. She won't let me get a tattoo. The redhead winced. That's a bummer, dude. Well, hopefully you get in. You seem like a cool dude. He extended his hand and gave a great big cheerful smile. A Quirk that's all about tattoos is manly as hell. I'm Ejiro Kirishima, by the way. Izuku Midoriya. Izuku grabbed his hand and took in a deep breath. I hope so too. Best of luck out there. You too, man. And is that normal? Ijiro pointed towards Izuku's sides where miniature hawks and Maruko were fighting it out. Yep. He let out a long sigh and then smiled. They kind of have a mind of their own. They'll do what I tell them, but they still have their own personalities. Radical. Who the hell still uses that word? So, what happens when you wash them off? Do they die? Izuku glanced at the temporary tattoos currently running amok on his body. I have no idea. Ever since he had first put on an All Might sticker tattoo during Katsuki's 5th birthday, and it came to life to punch Katsuki in the face, Izuku had known that temporary tattoos weren't strong. They were incredibly weak. A light tap could destroy them, and they could barely even do any damage. Endeavor could boil water eventually. Hawks could maybe cause a paper cut. Maruko's kicks were a bit like having a wad of paper thrown at him, and All Might. All Might just flexed. Izuku watched as his tattoos along with his hopes and dreams were completely and utterly crushed underneath the smallest possible robot he could have found. Given that it was still the size of a car, it wasn't all that small, but there was absolutely nothing that his pathetic little temporary tattoos could do about it. Fuck, Izuku shouted and pulled out a Sharpie from his pants. A desperation move in every sense. He dragged the marker along his extended arm and ended the tip with a sharp-looking arrow. Permanent marker was just about the only thing that gave credence to his Quirk being stronger the more permanent the marking was. In the case of anything drawn with a Sharpie, he could use it as a weapon that was about as solid as something made of metal. With another roar, Izuku tossed a poorly drawn spear towards the robot. As expected, it bounced off. The robot turned towards him, its lone red light acting like an eye. Was he going to die in the UA entrance exams? The robot sped towards him, its armor-plated body ready to crush him. He flinched and waited for pain. Instead, he heard the sound of metal bending and tearing. He opened his eyes and saw a girl wearing a blue tracksuit. She was in his group. Her long orange hair tied in a ponytail had made her stand out. Izuku's first thought was that she was cute and had that mystical girl-next-door property he had heard so much about. And watching her rip apart a robot he couldn't even dent with her giant hands only caused a single thought to enter his head. This was his mother's fault. Hey, the orange-haired girl jumped down, and her hands shrank down to normal size. Are you okay? I heard you scream. Is it because you lost your shirt? Izuku let out a sigh and scratched the back of his head. No, it's just easier to use my quirk when I'm shirtless. I'm just coming to terms with the fact that my quirk isn't strong enough to do anything. Oh, her shoulders slumped and she looked down the street. Well, your all-might thingy is cute. Anyways, I gotta go. Good luck. And with that, she was off running. A moment later, the sound of her tearing apart another mech could be heard. His Miyurko tattoo walked over to him and hugged his leg, her large red eyes almost making her look adorable. Congrats, I'm gonna wash you last. There were a dozen other things he should have done besides go home. He'd just end up being annoyed if he went there, and angry, so angry at his mother. He should have gone for a run. He should have gone to the gym. He should have gone over to Katsuki's and watched him gloat about how many robots he destroyed. But part of him wanted to go home. He wanted to get angry at her. And he should be. She was the one to break the promise, not him. If he got good grades in high school, if he was at the top of his class, if he applied to Tokyo U, if he had done everything she asked, then he could get a tattoo. He had jumped through those loops. He had worked so hard to get his grades. He had worked so hard to study, and harder still to train to become a hero. But that promise was broken. He stared at the door to their apartment for a few moments. It wasn't too late. He could turn away now and avoid the coming fight. He could go cool off. The doorknob was cold enough to burn. The scent of his favorite meal greeted him and made his stomach twist as the memory of that meal instantly soured in his mind. Why was she making his favorite food today? Why not last night? Why not tomorrow? But today, the day that he failed to get into UA because she refused to let him get a tattoo. Because she broke her promise. He slammed the door behind him, mostly on accident, and took his shoes off. Izuku? His mother popped her head out of the kitchen, but her smile died when she saw him. She wiped her hands on her apron as she looked towards the ground. How'd it go? How do you think? He plopped his shoes off and tried not to yell at her, tried not to blame this all on her. He could understand her not wanting him to get a tattoo at his age. He knew that the laws made it so that minors were prohibited from getting a tattoo, but there were exceptions. He just needed his mother's permission. It was for his quirk. That you tried your hardest. She met his eyes again and gave him a big smile. Tried his hardest? How could he try his hardest when he wasn't allowed to use his quirk? He had to use a Sharpie to draw the equivalent of a sharp stick on his arm to get any real results. The stupid sticker tattoos he had were worthless. How the fuck could he try his hardest when she broke her promise? Izuku took in a deep breath and walked past her, his entire body tensing as he ground his teeth. He missed not being so angry all the time, but every single time he saw his mother, he couldn't help but feel betrayed and manipulated. That's why she was cooking his favorite meal, to calm him down. A letter came. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a white envelope. A big red U was stamped onto the front. Tokyo U, the school she wanted him to go to. It's for you. I thought you could use a bit of good news. It was still sealed. At least she still respected his privacy. He nearly tore it from her hands and ripped the envelope open. The fact that this was an acceptance letter to one of the top colleges in Tokyo did absolutely nothing to cheer him up. He shoved the letter back into her hand. Congratulations. I got accepted to your school. He tried to walk away, tried to get back to his room where he could lock the door and brood in peace. But she spoke up. Izuku. She stomped her foot and flailed the letter at him. This is a big deal. You'll be able to go to college, get a good job, a good, safe job, and... I don't want a good, safe job. He spun on his heel and towered over her. I don't want to be whatever it is that you want me to be. I want to be a hero. And to do that, all I needed was a tattoo. That's all. It could have been on my back. It could have been on my legs. It could have been hidden so that it could only be seen when I was doing hero work. But because you broke our promise, I couldn't get one. You're the reason why I failed to get into UA, and I'm the reason why I got into Tokyo U. She started to cry. It wasn't the first time he had made her cry. It wouldn't be the last. He turned, taking a few steps away from her and towards his room. All you had to do was support me. Izuku. He could hear the sound of her breaking down once again. He found himself with zero sympathy for her. He tried to understand her. He tried to make sure that she understood him. He was clear with his intentions. She was not. She made zero effort to actually understand him. Hell, she went out of her way to misunderstand him. The dinner he ate that night was cold. Izuku? A light knock came from his door. A pounding lack of sleep roared through his mind, and a flash of anger greeted him when he pushed it away. He spent so much time last night just being angry. His sketchbook was filled with designs for his tattoos. He'd get the moment he could. His artistic skill was lacking, which was why he just had rough drafts of what he wanted. He had a plan to get a tattoo, with or without his mother's permission. Once he was 18, he'd be able to travel on his own, and then he could get a tattoo whenever he wanted, which was right now. That was 5 months to save up for a ticket and the cost of the tattoo. A decent part-time job would help. I wanted to wait for this weekend so we could go shopping together, but she trailed off. She always trailed off when she wanted him to feel guilty over something. I left some money in front of your door. Please use it to buy school supplies and some new clothes. You've earned it in. Another pause. I love you. He heard his mother shuffle away, and then a few minutes later the apartment door closed. Izuku rushed towards the door and found the Tokyo U envelope just sitting on the ground, bulging with a healthy amount of cash. It wasn't enough for a ticket, and even if he did just keep it, she'd probably ask to see what he'd bought. He might be able to save some of it, though. It was a start. But he might be able to convince someone to give him a tattoo with this money. Look, kid. The slender woman with dark red hair and amber-colored eyes scratched the back of her head as she looked at him. This was the 5th tattoo shop that he had been to today, and it was the 5th one that was about to turn him down. I get your sob story right, but that's just all the more reason why I gotta say it's a no-go. Izuku let his hand slide off the counter. The money his mother had given him for new clothes was burning a hole in his pocket like no tomorrow. He should have known that every single place would have refused him, and it wasn't like he'd be able to get a tattoo today since he'd have to make an appointment first. Besides, what was the point? He couldn't unfail the entrance exam. The woman continued, flipping her hand around and exposing the beautiful tattoo of a female samurai on her arm that had drawn Izuku in. I'm sure that every single artist would love to work on you. What makes you say that? He looked around the room for a moment. It was clean, as the classification of tattoos being a medical procedure made the few parlors in Tokyo as clean as a hospital. Numerous photos of tattoos decorated the room, and an entire binder of designs sat ready for people to browse through. The woman snorted and laughed. Are you kidding, kid? Do you have any idea how many tattoo artists would love to watch their artwork come to life? Shit, just thinking about it gets me all kinds of fired up. I'd pour my heart and soul into that piece. She stretched her arms wide and spun on her stool. Every single one of these would look like amateur hour. With her tattooed back towards him, he could see the intricate workings of something amazing on her back. Her arms fell, and she let out a low and annoyed hiss. But that's part of the problem, yeah? I put my best work on you, and you start trying to be a hero, and people are going to start asking where you got it. That leads them back to me, and then I lose my license. Bitterness and disappointment did not make for a good mood. A flash of anger tore through him and made the fact that he hadn't eaten yet send a wave of weakness over him. He nearly stumbled but stood strong. Oh, well, what if I had my mother's permission? I'd consider it, but even with a parent's permission, it's still illegal, you know? But, maybe it'd be fine if you became a hero? She waved her hand and then grabbed one of her cards. But, legit, when you turn 20, show up and I'll give you the biggest deal of the century. Izuku took her card and looked at it for a few moments. There was no way he was going to hold on to this for 2 whole years. Thanks, but do you really not know anyone that would at least be willing to talk? She pouted slightly and kicked her leg against her desk. She gave a light wince and rubbed her knee. Anyone that has a license isn't going to be too keen on risking it. She scratched the back of her head and let out a sigh. I don't really know anyone that would. Another card. Another dead end. Why did everything feel 2 years away at this point? Well, thanks. Oi, a low, hiss-like sound drew Izuku's focus towards the door, and there he saw a devil in a maroon suit. The man's smooth red skin would make him stand out in any crowd. He also had 2 red horns that stuck out several inches from his forehead, black slicked-back hair, and a soured look on his face. He looked like a real demon. When it comes to quirks, there was a wide range for what humans could look like. Izuku's homeroom teacher was basically a polar bear, but still, this guy just looked terrifying. He had an aura that choked the air with fear. Oi! The red-skinned man walked forward, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped forward, and his lower jaw protruding ever so slightly due to the 2 tusk-like teeth. Oi, 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 oi. That was at least 3 too many ois. Izuku took a step back and watched the man for a few seconds. A few of the buttons on his dress shirt were undone, showing off the ink on his chest. A customer? Oh, the woman behind the counter stood back ever so slightly. Can I help you with anything? The red-skinned man placed both hands onto the desk and took in a deep breath. His voice was like the crackling of coals in the middle of a summer campfire. Maybe. You the artist? Yes. The woman sounded very unsure about her profession. Good. Now then, I have a very important question to ask. The red-skinned man's broad shoulders rose as he took in a deep breath. What inspires you? Like, for tattoos and shit. Hell, art in general. The red-skinned man placed a fist down onto the table. It almost looked like a beast was trying to be a man with how aggressive he was acting. Like, what do you do when you've lost that inspiration and shit? What gets you excited to do what you do? It's my job. The woman let out a low breath, visibly relaxing for a few seconds. Most of the time, the customer knows what they want and I just draw that. It doesn't really require inspiration. Okay, but what if that doesn't work? What then? She shrugged. I take a vacation. None of that shit's good. The red-skinned man pushed off the counter and waved his hand. He rolled his shoulders and gave a short nod. Thanks for your time. Despite the brief hint of relief Izuku felt when the man walked out of the building, Izuku found himself stumbling forward. His voice was caught in his throat for just a moment, and the fatigue from skipping lunch was catching up to him. But still he pressed forward. Hey! He shouted louder than he intended. Wait. Hey! The red-skinned man glared at him. What you want, Greenbean? I've been looking for someone to give me a tattoo all day, but I'm underaged. Why the fuck should I care? The red-skinned man walked towards him again. He wasn't exactly looming over Izuku, but he was still more than a few inches taller than Izuku's own 5 feet 8 inches. She can't even ink other members. This ain't no charity case. No, wait, you're not understanding. Izuku held up his hand like he was trying to push the man back. It's my quirk. A single bushy black eyebrow told Izuku to get to the point. My quirk, it makes stuff drawn on me come to life. That's why I. The growl of his stomach ended his sentence. The red-skinned man pointed towards a nearby ramen shop. You want to talk about it over some ramen? So you mean to tell me that the red-skinned man picked up the large bowl of ramen and began slurping like he had come crawling out of some anime, only without the mess. When he placed the bowl down, there was a noodle that had gotten wrapped around one of his tusks, which he quickly slurped up. You tried to be a hero but couldn't cause you didn't have a tattoo? And that you couldn't get a tattoo because of the strict laws and a strict mother? That's fucking bullshit, Oh, they still haven't introduced themselves yet, despite the red-skinned man having polished off nearly 2 bowls of ramen already. Wait, was he going to have to pay for this? Izuku said with a smile and looked at his own nearly finished bowl of ramen. Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya? The red-skinned man's eyes went wide for a moment. Yeah? Izuku raised an eyebrow in response. It wasn't every day that someone reacted to his last name like that. The red-skinned man shook his head and rolled his shoulders. It's nothing. Anyways, I'm Tanaka Yamato. Nice to meet you. Tanaka grunted and leaned forward onto the table, signaling for another bowl of ramen. I do just have to ask though, why do you still want a tattoo? I mean, a place like UA isn't going to give you a retest or anything, right? So why not just wait? Because Izuku bit his lip. Tanaka had a point. Why did he feel so desperate to get a tattoo right now? Was it because he felt like he was owed one? Was he just frustrated that he failed? Why? Because he repeated and stared at the ceramic bowl that had just been placed in front of Tanaka. He clenched his fist and then sighed. I don't know. I guess. I just want to know if I could have made it. You want to test your limits? I can dig it. Tanaka began to devour his third bowl of ramen with some loud slurping action. That's what I do every chance I get. But another question. The bowl was half empty when it was placed down, and Tanaka gave Izuku a glare that on anyone else would have looked like a pout. But on Tanaka, it looked like Izuku was half a syllable away from losing a limb. How does this help me? Izuku felt his voice crack just by drawing in a breath. Well, everywhere I've gone, they all talked about how much they wanted to tattoo me. That the idea of seeing their work come to life was an inspiration. So, I don't know. Maybe it'd be the same for whoever it is you're trying to help? Tanaka leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms, his yellow eyes closing while he stroked his chin. I'm not the artsy type, so I really wouldn't know how this inspiration stuff works, but I've been trying to get her inspired for a while now. I got her a computer, a bunch of paint stuff, and even a giant brush, but all she uses that for is whacking me upside the head. So far, nothing's really worked. Izuku hummed and nodded along to what Tanaka was saying. Can I ask about her? Who? The girl you're trying to inspire? Oh, right, my little sister. Ori. Tanaka leaned forward with a great big smile on his face. She's the best tattoo artist in all of Japan. It's her quirk or something. I'm not 100% sure about what's going on with everything she does, but she's unlike any other artist out there. Here, let me show you. He undid a few more buttons of his dress shirt and revealed a tattoo he had on his chest. Rich, vibrant colors, exquisite details, and a powerful design made the dragon on Tanaka's chest look like it wasn't a tattoo, but a painting or a still frame from a high-budget anime. That tattoo was everything Izuku had ever wanted. Something that looked powerful, that looked solid, that looked like it was already alive. He could picture the dragon curling around his arm, a faint, almost unnoticeable sensation as it roamed around his skin, and the peeling sensation as the dragon launched from his arm attacking some unnamed foe. That's amazing, right? She's so talented. She's inked most of the other guys too, but she put her best work on me, even if my skin isn't exactly easy to work with. Apparently, the dragon is supposed to protect me or something. Tanaka shrugged and buttoned up his shirt once again. There's a big one on my back too. It's an Oni mask. Tanaka gestured towards his face and gave a toothy smile. Not that I need a mask, am I right? If it helps, you're the nicest Oni I've ever met. Izuku gave a small shrug. Tanaka let out a short laugh and slapped his knee. Have you even met another Oni? Nope, but I had a crush on a Tanuki before. Another fit of laughter escaped Tanaka. All right, Izuku, I think you might just be worth a shot. What do you say? Want to come with me and see if my sister will ink you? The answer was obvious. There were several indicators of wealth and power in Tokyo, one of which was using land in an inefficient way, especially in the center of a bustling commercial area. There were few things as inefficient as a traditional Japanese compound, complete with its own patch of forest woven into the concrete jungle that surrounded it. A large high fence that could almost be called a castle wall surrounded much of the compound, with a few buildings reaching 2 or more stories in height. It felt like that time his class went on a field trip to Edo Castle. Only there was one big difference. The people. A thrumming sense of nausea overtook him as he had followed Tanaka halfway across Tokyo into the heart of the Amaji district. The more he looked at Tanaka, the less he looked like a demon, and the more Izuku could see him for what he really was, Yakuza. When Izuku was still little, All Might and the police led what might have been a purging of the former kings of the underworld. After being designated as villains, many Yakuza groups fell. Others simply vanished. There were still a few groups rumored to have survived, closely watched by the police, and treated as something of a historic artifact. All right, Izuku. Tanaka placed a red hand on Izuku's shoulder and nodded towards the gate, which had 2 men standing guard in front of it. They were dressed similarly to Tanaka and even had some of his gruff disposition. Ori's in there, Just do me a favor and keep your head down and try not to look too many people in the eye. And if anyone gives you shit, you tell them you're my guest. Oh, good. So you're a higher up? Nah, I'm just the muscle, but they'll still respect me if I say you're for Ori. Why was Ori sounding more and more like some horrific beast he was about to be sacrificed to? Izuku nodded and swallowed his fears. If he ran now, they'd probably chase him, then he'd be all kinds of screwed. He was just here to see if some crazy Yakuza guy's crazy sister would be crazy enough to give him a tattoo. On the plus side, he could just say that he was kidnapped by the Yakuza and they robbed him and then forced him to get a tattoo. No, he wasn't going to lie like that. If he got a tattoo, he was going to tell his mother that he got it. Hopefully willingly. Yo, one of the guys at the door raised a hand. Tanaka, I swear you get uglier every time I see you. You didn't get into any fights today, did you? I told you, Sho. Tanaka scratched the back of his head and then gestured towards Izuku. I was out looking for inspiration for Ori. Sho glanced over towards Izuku. The cigarette in his mouth and the tight fit of his suit made him look like one of those classical high-up Yakuza members. That raised the question of why someone like him was guarding the door. This kid's the inspiration? Yeah, his quirk is wild. Just wait. Ori's going to be so excited. Tanaka, my man, you didn't kidnap this kid, did you? 'Cause Granny ain't going to like that if you did. What? Tanaka took a step back and looked at Izuku. No, he's here because he wants a tattoo. I mean, I even bought him ramen and stuff. This isn't a kidnapping. Besides, he's like 17. I'm kidding, Tanaka, sheesh. Anyways, just make sure he doesn't cause any trouble. Sho waved his hand and took back his position of leaning against the wall. They passed without incident through the first gate that led to a long, thin courtyard surrounded on all sides by high walls. On the other end was another gate, the actual main entrance to the compound. Tonka led Izuku through the main courtyard before they turned towards a garden, complete with a well-maintained koi pond. This place felt like it was far too nice to belong to the Yakuza. Maybe they just all worked for that granny person Sho mentioned, and she just really liked Yakuza aesthetics? Maybe she was the wife of one of the leaders that got taken out? There were so many questions buzzing through Izuku's head, and answers seemed far too dangerous to get. They arrived at a small house, separate from the main building, but larger than his mother's apartment. Oi! Tanaka shouted as they approached the building. Sis, I got a surprise for you. The sound of bottles banging and a few curse words echoed from inside the building before the front door opened. What the hell do you want, dumbass? Of all the things Izuku had been expecting Ori to be, attractive was not on the list. With the exception of her pale horns, there was very little that made Izuku believe that Ori was related to Tanaka. The summer yukata she had on in the middle of winter was half falling off of her body, revealing her pale, smooth skin in far more places than Izuku would have thought possible. A traditional white chest binding preserved her modesty as one sleeve of her dress dangled uselessly at her side. The edge of a tattoo could be seen on the top of her shoulder and a bit on her upper arm as well. Her right thigh was exposed, revealing the top part of a cherry blossom tattoo that appeared just as lifelike as the dragon on Tanaka's chest. The sharpness of her lone blue eye seemed to stand out amidst her long snow-white hair that was tied into a wild ponytail held in place by several large pins, somehow concealing her left eye from him. On her cheek was the kanji for dumbass, and the still wet brush in her hand was the most likely culprit. The scowl she wore on her face seemed like it was simply meant to be there. She basically looked like the insanely beautiful girlfriend of a Yakuza member, and she probably wasn't the sane one in the relationship. Ori glared at him for just a single second before glaring even harder at Tanaka, the wet paintbrush in her hand ready to be flailed around like a deadly weapon. What the hell are you shouting for, dumbass? I was this close to coming up with something to paint. Is that why she had dumbass on her cheek? And who the hell is this? Izuku found himself facing the moist end of the brush. Oh, well, I was trying to figure out how to inspire you. Tanaka scratched the back of his head, and the image of the gruff Yakuza muscle that Izuku had first seen was completely replaced by a boneheaded and doting brother. And I found Izuku. I don't care who he is. Ori pointed the brush at her brother again. Why the hell didn't you call? We have cell phones. Just because your skull is twice as thick as normal doesn't mean your brain is any smaller. Actually, it is. Tanaka answered proudly. Remember, we got those x-rays? Ori's arm fell, and her face took on a slightly sour look of defeat. She let out a sigh and looked towards Izuku again. All right, kid. Why was everyone calling him kid? Why the hell would you follow someone that looks like that? She gestured towards her brother, and then towards the compound in general, into a place that couldn't be more clearly labeled Yakuza. Because, she looked him up and down, I don't think you have what it takes. The fact that Ori had at least an inch or two on him without her horns became very important, in large part thanks to her smug look that was amplified by her single visible eye, especially with how deep of a blue it was. I came because I want a tattoo, Izuku said firmly. If it was some scary Yakuza guy or Tanaka, he might have been a bit more gentle, but there was something about the smug, condescending nature of Ori that was driving him crazy. Oh, Ori crossed her arms and raised an eyebrow. And what makes you think I'll just give you a tattoo? Because you'll want to. Izuku rolled up his sleeve and presented his arm to her. Want? Ori let out a laugh. What makes you think I'll want to ink you up? There are plenty of other people I give a shit about that would make a better canvas than you. Why would I waste my quirk on you? Shorty. Izuku winced at the term. It wasn't that 5 feet 8 inches was short, but that Ori and Tanaka were simply tall. Hell, Izuku was pretty sure he was taller than Sho, and he was the guy that guarded the front gate. He let out a deep breath and then looked at her brush. My quirk can make the things drawn on me real. Bullshit. Ori spat, glaring at him. She looked at her brother for a moment. Is this why you brought him here? Well, yeah. He sounded desperate, and I figured something like that would get you excited. Tanaka flailed his arm around dramatically. I mean, it sounds cool, right? Just imagine a dragon coming out of him. He'd be like that panda from that movie we always watch. Did you actually see it happen? Ori shook her head, rolling her eye. You have a brush. Izuku pointed at her hand. Why don't you draw something on my arm? She looked at the brush, then at his arm. With 2 quick stomps that made her bound chest bounce noticeably, she marched over and grabbed his arm. Fine, but I'm drawing something stupid. Why? Do I look mature enough not to draw something dumb on some cocky brat? Well, she did have dumbass written on her cheek. Her brushstrokes were smooth, even, and confident. In one fluid motion, she finished her masterpiece of very crude doodle. Well, Ori tapped his arm again with the brush. When's it supposed to work? Half of him was tempted to wipe it off and tell her to get lost. With a sigh, Izuku peeled the drawing off his arm and held it up. Silence. Well? So you laminated it. Big deal. I've seen YouTube videos like that. Ori remained completely unconvinced. Is that all it does? Tanaka's shoulders slumped. Man, now you're making me look like a clown in front of my sister. I thought you were cool, Izuku. Now I see why you failed the UA entrance exam. Yeah, he probably should have done this from the start. He tossed the crude drawing behind him and reached into his pocket, pulling out one of his temporary tattoos. He still had about a dozen left from the exam. Lick. Splat. Press. Peel. A flexing All Might showed up on his arm, faded as hell thanks to how poorly he applied the temporary tattoo. Once again, he was greeted with silence as All Might moved on his arm, flexing and acting like an arrogant asshole, just like he always did, only this silence was in awe. See? He asked and then forced All Might off of his skin. The small tattoo version fell off of his arm and looked more than a little stunned at everything. This is what my quirk really does. This is just a crappy temporary tattoo that I put on with my spit, so he's a bit weak. But the better the tattoo is, the stronger they are. Well? He asked, holding his arms out wide. The look on Ori's face told him that while he might not regret working with her, that didn't mean the process was going to be pleasant. Tanaka? She said in a very pleased voice. You're a great older brother. Now go hang out with the others. She grabbed Izuku's bare arm and pulled him towards her. He caught a glimpse of her left eye when her chest met his, a slight red glow filtering out from beneath her snowy hair. I feel inspired. Hell, all right. Good luck, Izuku. You're going to need it. Luck never was one of Izuku's strong suits. In a whirl of white-haired chaos, Izuku found himself tossed inside that small traditional-style house. He was sent spinning, his coat, and then his shirt promptly tossed to the side, and his shoes had somehow come off before he hit the tatami-matted room. The inside of the house looked like it belonged to Ori. Art supplies rested on every piece of furniture, and dozens of empty canvases sat waiting to be used, while many more only had black, angry marks that occasionally looked like curse words. The door clicked shut, and Izuku turned to see Ori looking at him. She looked hungry. A wide smile dominated her face, distorting the dumbass on her cheek, and the dim light of the room made her red eye all the more apparent. She pulled out the pins in her hair, letting it down before she gathered it up into a ponytail that would stay out of the way that revealed her pointed ears. If it wasn't for the fact that she looked like a Yandere character, it might have been erotic. Actually, it was. It was very erotic. Congratulations, little boy, Ori all but purred as she walked over to him, a small needle appearing in her hand. You got what you wanted, you're going to be my canvas. Stop calling me little boy, I'm almost 18. Whatever, she waved her hand at him. I'll call you a man when I feel like it. Now lay down unless you want to be here all night. She paused and gave him a smug smile. I'm sure that's the first time a girl ever said that to you. Despite the fact that she was right, it was still easy to be offended by that. You're kind of a bitch, aren't you? She shrugged again and walked over to the wall, where she flipped the light switch off, bathing the room in only what little natural light came from outside. You'll be calling me worse soon enough, but once we're done you'll be thanking me. Why? Because when I use my quirk on someone, several things happen. The glow of her red eye lit up her face and dominated the darkening room as the sun began to set outside. You see, normally it's more painful than a regular tattoo, and the more detail I put into the tattoo, the more painful it is, but it's also brighter, and the boon is greater. Boon? Izuku asked, raising an eyebrow as Ori pressed her hand onto his bare chest. Her push was subtle and barely there, yet it was enough to guide him to the ground. You saw Tanaka's tattoos, right? The dragon on his chest protects him, or at least it should. It's hard to tell, but my tattoos are more than just tattoos. The last thing he saw before he flipped onto his back was Ori's eager smile. He had several regrets at the moment, but they all paled to the failure he suffered at UA. And on you, there'll be even more. So you're going to be getting my best work yet. Okay, so, can you give me a— He stopped when he felt her straddle his back. You can decide the next one. She leaned forward, her breath against his ear. For now, just be my canvas and you will not be disappointed. It might have been the virgin in him. It might have been his own indecisiveness on what to ask for. It might have been the fact that no matter how bad Ori's personality was, he still thought that she was cute. Or it could have simply been the curiosity about what she would produce that led him to nod his head and say yes. A beautiful tattoo. The promise of a second one. And whatever the hell a boon was as well. You know, he started, smiling at the blank canvas he could see across the room. With how our quirks work we might make a— A scream escaped him as he felt her needle press into his back. When she had said it would hurt, he did not think that it would be quite so bad. A light prick maybe, like a shot at the doctor's, maybe a nasty scrape. But this felt like his skin was being burnt and peeled off all at once, only to be stitched back on with a rusty needle. The pain came and went like waves, giving him just enough time to come back to reality before he succumbed to the pain once again. Only the slight touch of Ori's hand that was like a cool ice pack on his burning skin kept him grounded as to why he was here. He was going to get a tattoo. His first tattoo. He would bear through this pain and prove to himself that his quirk was amazing. Still, it felt like it was taking forever. Oh, he heard Ori and felt her pause for a moment. Well, hello there. Can you move your head just a bit? Izuku tried to move his head, but found Ori held it tight. Not you, your tattoo. She could talk to his tattoo. It was already moving. He wanted to see it. Thank you, she said sweetly, and the pain resumed. He no longer screamed with the pain, but that didn't mean he could speak either. At some point he had been given a leather belt to bite into to help with the pain. He wasn't sure if it did. Pain and time blurred into one existence of pure suffering that seemed inescapable. And then, it was over. Done. Ori let out a long yawn and stood up from his back. He heard one of her joints pop at least once. Now come on, let's go outside, I want to see him. Izuku could only nod as Ori pulled him up with a firm hand. He barely managed to walk, his shoulders still aching with echoes of pain that might never go away. But as he stepped outside, he saw something on his upper arm move for just a moment. He had a tattoo. He glanced up at the sky. It was orange, just like it had been when he first entered the building. Only this time it was sunrise. For her part, Ori looked dead tired. Her already scattered appearance looked even more so with her white hair a wild and untamed mess and the dumbass on her cheek reduced to a mere smear. Despite how tired he was from the pain and from not sleeping, he never felt better. Was this her boon? Or was he just so excited to finally be able to do this? Come on out. He nearly felt his arm fall off as a great white fist grabbed onto his shoulder and pulled itself out. Sparks of blue electricity appeared as the creature landed. A massive gorilla stood in front of them, its pale blue skin outlined by a thick black line that looked like a living brush stroke. Even when slouched over, the gorilla was easily over twice Izuku's height and larger than most of those villain bots he couldn't do anything against. But this guy looked like he could rip those bots to shred with ease. As though in agreement, the gorilla pounded on its chest, a sound that boomed like thunder and sent sparks of blue electricity around him. Well, Ori let out a long stretch as she walked over towards his tattoo. She touched the gorilla with a large smile on her face before she looked back towards him, her red and blue eyes shining in the early morning light. What are you going to name him? Izuku watched for a moment. Did the gorilla recognize Ori as its creator? Were they both the creators? What was his name? Calm. The gorilla shook its head in disgust and made a grunting noise. All right, so it could have opinions. How about Raijin? Ori offered. Raijin nodded, and Raijin was amazing. By the time Izuku got home, he had barely enough energy to crawl into his bed and plug his phone in. At some point last night it had died. There were countless missed phone calls and texts from his mother. With the last bit of his energy, he managed to text her back. Home safe. Sleep now. He'd deal with her tomorrow. It took not coming home one night for his mother to lose all trust in him. Instantly, she assumed the worst, that he started doing drugs, that he was lying to her, that this was his rebellious phase, that he was hanging out with the wrong crowd, that he was kidnapped, and a dozen other make-believe scenarios that appeared in her head. And any excuse he offered was instantly disregarded as a lie. Because it was. The lie he repeated a dozen times was that he had lost track of time walking around because he was still upset and ended up falling asleep on the train. By the time someone woke him, it was already morning. It sounded logical. It sounded like the most reasonable thing in the world. But his mother refused to believe him. All right. Izuku adjusted the collar of his dress shirt. It felt strange no longer being forced to wear his school uniform. But since he was going to Tokyo U, it was expected that he at least dressed the part. Besides, he thought he looked good in a button-down and a set of slacks. On the other hand, his bright red shoes were probably just an interesting fashion statement. I'm going to orientation. He honestly didn't know how much sleep he got last night as he kept getting woken up by random pains in his body, mostly on the bottom of his feet, sometimes his legs or arms. Nothing too bad, but it was just enough to wake him up. It had been like that for the past couple of days. It wasn't his first day of classes, those weren't for another month, but there was a lot he could get from orientation. Like a good dose of pressure in trying to figure out what the hell he wanted to do with his life. It wasn't like UA was the only path to being a hero. There were other avenues he could take. They were just less than ideal. Still, it would have been nice to go to UA. And where are you going afterwards? Inko asked. She moved and adjusted his collar again, somehow making it feel 10 times worse. She stuck out her hand, and his tie floated over towards her. And what about your tie? I don't need to wear a tie, Mom. I could just wear a t-shirt, and it would be fine. It's just orientation. He pushed her hand to the side gently. And I'll probably eat lunch at campus, and then come home. Inko narrowed her eyes slightly. She still didn't trust him. Well, okay, but text me if something changes, all right? Especially if you meet some friends there. Ah, my baby's growing up so fast. Inko gave a light gasp, not from her being surprised or anything, but because she thought that was what was cute for moms to do. You might even meet a girl. Izuku rolled his eyes and let out a sigh. That's not going to happen, Mom. Now can I go? Yes, and remember to text me where you are. Inko held up his phone and handed it to him. Please. Izuku sighed. I'll try. He really needed to thank Katsuki's mom for talking Inko out of putting a tracking app on his phone. That would have been way too much. It wasn't even like he was even going to do something he shouldn't. Technically, aside from going to a Yakuza place one time for an illegal quirk-based tattoo from a crazy woman that was the very definition of a hot mess, he hadn't ever done anything remotely bad with his life. It was hard to believe that was over a week ago, but if he closed his eyes, he could still feel the sensation of Ori burning, ripping, shredding, and all around inflicting a great deal of pain into his back for the sake of getting a tattoo. And it had been rewarded. Keeping Raijin a secret from his mother sounded like it would have been a monumental task that bordered on the impossible. However, Izuku quickly realized that he could freely move his own tattoos. That made it so much easier to just hide Raijin whenever he wanted, or where Raijin just wanted to be. Currently, Raijin was hanging out on his arm doing tattoo gorilla things. By Izuku have. The door was shut behind him, and he headed towards the nearest station. Thankfully, Tokyo U wasn't terribly far from his mother's apartment, but it was far enough that he might be able to justify moving to a student dorm close by. Things to think about for sure, but more pressing was the great ape currently hanging around on his skin. Having Raijin and not knowing what exactly he could do was killing him. He finally had a tattoo that could do more than just be a neat party trick. He wanted to take Raijin somewhere and just watch him go nuts on something, but the chance simply hadn't come to him yet. He still had school, and now his mother was watching over him like a hawk. Not to mention, he couldn't just bring out his quirk in public for no reason. He needed to get away, go somewhere where he could summon a giant gorilla and not be judged, especially once said gorilla actually started to destroy stuff. He didn't get to ask Ori about what the lightning was about. Was that just aesthetics? Raijin's base tattoo had those bits of lightning around him, so they could just be there for show. But what if they weren't? What if Raijin actually had some kind of thunder-based power? How strong was it? What could he do with it? There was something he gleaned from his quirk after getting Raijin, like the connection he felt between him and his tattoos. It was loose, more empathetic than anything, but he could feel that Raijin was just as eager as he was to get out into the world and show off. What he didn't know was whatever the boon was that Ori had mentioned. He didn't feel any different, but she said the dragon on Tanaka's chest was supposed to protect him. How did that work? If a dragon was protection, then what was a gorilla? And wait, wasn't a dragon tattoo only for higher-ups? Wasn't Tanaka just the muscle? Or was that just some myth he picked up from something? Maybe he knew absolutely nothing about Yakuza culture beyond the fact that Tanaka looked like a demon and Ori acted like one. Orientation was boring as hell. It was just a giant welcome party that went over what the campus had to offer, like the food court, or the gym, or their arts program, or the fact that the college existed. They even had a few alumni giving a speech about how great they were for going to Tokyo U. It just felt hollow. He had dreamed so much about being a hero that he had completely tossed away any other alternative. He had a meeting with some counselor to help him out with that in about 2 hours. The meeting wasn't expected to last longer than 30 minutes. 30 minutes to figure out what he was supposed to devote the rest of his life to. Izuku glanced at the mediocre food that he had absent-mindedly devoured before he leaned back in his seat. At least the food at Tokyo U was pretty good. With a heavy sigh, he leaned back in his chair and stared up at the ceiling. What am I going to Ori? A pair of pale horns tipped with red and a piercing blue eye that could make the sky jealous greeted him along with a smile that reached her eyes, and then some. Yo, if it isn't my favorite canvas. She swooped past him and took the seat across from him with an expert level of grace that had her long black skirt flowing like she was in a dance. She looked completely different, and yet the same from when he had last seen her just over a week ago. Her long, snow-white hair was straight and loose, with some of it falling around her horn to cover her red eye again, and part of her smile. She had on a loose white blouse with only the top button undone, and a black vest that hugged her curves tight. Her long black skirt was slanted to one side, showing off just a bit of her long tan boots. You look like you're trying to be a pirate on Casual Friday. Izuku tried not to get caught too off guard by her smile. He could still feel the pain of her quirk. Huh, you're the first one to get that. Ori clapped her hands and put one boot up on the table. Check out these new boots I got. I think they just scream yar, give me your booty. Yeah, they do. Izuku blinked and then shook his head. Wait, what are you doing here? What do you think? She shot her arms out wide and gave a big grin. I'm a student here, art major. Or at least I was. Haven't actually taken an art class in a while, but I am next semester. In the meantime, I hang out and eat the food. What about you? What's your major? Izuku just shrugged. Ori snorted and took a bite of her food and hummed before she pointed her finger towards him with a snap. Mood. But hey, you'll find something. Worst case scenario, you go like business or something. I don't know, you seem smart, but not like computer smart. I think it's the freckles. My mom wants me to be a doctor. Everybody's mom wants their kid to be a doctor. Ori snorted and waved her hand like it wasn't any big deal. She leaned forward, one elbow on the table as she rested her cheek on her palm. He could nearly see the glow of her red eye as her smile grew again. But enough of the boring stuff. Have you let Raijin out? How is he? I haven't had a chance to let him out, but I guess he's fine. I think he might be a bit bored. Izuku shrugged and then tapped on the table lightly. I remember you mentioning something about a bone. What's with that? Oh, she stopped smiling and waved her hand like it was no big deal. She moved her hair for a moment and flashed her red eye at him. I mean, apparently the tattoos I make with my quirk are more than just tattoos. I told you about my brother's dragon, right? How it protects him. Yeah, you mentioned that. Izuku leaned forward a bit and then glanced around the food court. Honestly, he had no idea how much of this he should be talking about in public. But how? No idea. I should have used a better example. She tapped on her chin and then nodded. Oh, right, you saw it, right? The cherry blossom tree on my thigh? Yeah, what did that do? Make me tall. Huh. So, like, when I was 15, I was jealous that everyone was taller than me. And then one day, I went a little crazy and then gave myself a tree tattoo. Right after that, I started growing. And then before I knew it, I was the tallest and bustiest girl in my class. So yeah, cherry blossoms gave me puberty. She finished with a light shrug and then pointed at him. Though, I could have also been a late bloomer. There's also the tattoo on my brother's back. It makes him scarier than normal. But he's already pretty scary. So you're telling me it might be useless? More that it might do anything. I'm not even sure what boon a giant lightning gorilla might give. She squinted and looked at a bit of fruit on her plate. Maybe you'll get more out of potassium or something. I dunno, do gorillas eat bananas? Or is that just like a Donkey Kong thing? Izuku could only shrug. All right, but not that I'm complaining or anything, but why a gorilla? Ori hummed and took another long bite of her food. I honestly don't know, just felt like it. I felt like a giant thunder gorilla would look cool and look even cooler once it popped off your skin. It's hard to argue with the results. Izuku nodded. Raijin was more than impressive on his own. I guess I should think about what I want my next tattoo to be, right? Ori's smile grew and her eye flashed a bright red for a heartbeat. Such an eager canvas you are, Izuku. Well, I'll be happy to ink you up again at some point. But before all that, do you want to see what Raijin can do? Yeah, I'd love to, but I don't know of any place that I can really. He stopped when he saw Ori's already massive smile double in size. She loved to hold knowledge over people's heads, didn't she? You know a place? She nodded. On a scale of 1 to walking into a Yakuza hideout, how dangerous is it? An arbitrary 7. Ori shrugged. I mean, it's normally not dangerous or anything. But what do you say? Come on, it'll be fun. It's not like you have anything else to do, right? Izuku opened his mouth to protest, but the smile pulling on his lip and the sensation of Raijin pounding its chest forced him to stop. He wanted this. Sure, but I'll need an excuse for my mom. Why? Ori looked slightly offended. Because I'm on a short leash ever since I came home after spending the entire night out. Ori blinked. Oh, that's my fault, huh? Well, mostly your fault, I guess. You should have come earlier or something. Eri spun around the table and sat right next to him. Here, give me your phone. Before he could object, she swiped it from him, opened the camera app, and pushed herself close to him. Come on, smile. He flashed an awkward and forced smile, and Ori took the photo. You suck at smiling. Be more photogenic next time, Izuku. She slid back over to her seat and resumed eating. But there, you can send that to your mom and tell her you're going to hang out with this hottie you met at college. That might actually go over well. It did. Much like Tanaka had done over a week ago, Ori had led him halfway across Tokyo and into the Amaji district, but this time they didn't go to the compound. Instead, he found himself following her as went into a large warehouse. From the outside, there was nothing but silence, but as they walked through the doors and went down several flights of stairs, Izuku began to feel it. A loud pounding bass that got his blood pumping. The cheer of a crowd. And then, the sounds of battle. If stepping into the Yakuza compound had been like stepping into another world, walking down into this fight club was like walking into hell itself. With just a few short steps, his heart was already pounding to match the endless beats that seemed to engulf everything around him. The lights were flashing, and the people were closing in around him. There were so many of them, and of so many different kinds. Street thugs, students, businessmen, Yakuza members, and so many more all stood cheering, shouting, and clamoring for the attention of men behind thick glass as they bet on the winners of the fight. Were it not for Ori's hand wrapped tightly around his wrist, he would have been swallowed up and eaten in this place in a matter of moments. Somehow, Ori managed to navigate this crowd with ease and promptly took Izuku through a locked gate into a more silent area of the underground. He could still feel the pounding of the music, but there was a silence here that could not be ignored. There were more men in suits, a few people that looked like thugs, and more than a few people that looked like they were in the process of counting their teeth. Ori, what are we doing here? Because I don't feel like getting my ass kicked. Puffed. She snorted and let go of his wrist. Have some faith, Izuku. I know what I'm doing. She looked around and bounced on her heels for a moment before her focus snapped towards a slick-looking man that was wearing a pinstriped black and white suit, complete with the fedora. Ida, over here. Ida, who had been staring at them the whole time, pushed himself off the wall and walked over. A katana was strapped to his back, while he carried another one in his hand like it was nothing out of the ordinary. With an overly pleasant smile on his face, Ida gave Ori a slight bow, his free hand going over his heart while his straight black hair swung freely for a moment. Lady Ori, it's good to see you out and about. Sadly, if you're looking for your brother, he's not why I'm here. Ori waved her hand like it was nothing and then pointed towards Izuku. Ida, this is Izuku. Ida's pale green eyes widened as he turned to look at him. So this is the canvas you mentioned. Again, Ida gave a light bow. It's a pleasure to meet you, Izuku. Yeah. Izuku, this is Ida. He's not as creepy as he looks. He's actually really nice for an old guy. Ida gave a slight glare towards Ori. I'm 28. That's nice. Ori bounced on her heels and looked around the area for a moment. Anyways, Ida, can you keep him out of trouble? Ida finished as he gestured towards Izuku with a slight head tilt. It would be my pleasure. Great. Ori clapped her hands and smiled at both of them. Izuku, I'll be right back. I'm just going to see if there's someone here that Raijin can fight and see if we can put you in quicker. I'm so excited. With that, Ori was gone, bouncing down the long concrete hallway and then around a corner with all the confidence of a kid at a playground. It's been a while since I've seen her so excited, Ida muttered in a subdued voice, his head swaying side to side a bit like a puppet. I'm going to cut straight to the edge with you. Straight to the edge? Was he making a pun? Was it a Quirk pun? Why did people make those? Was he supposed to start making tattoo puns now? The slight glint of steel as Ida unsheathed his katana just a hair brought that train of thought crumbling down. Izuku held up his hands and blinked. I'm not going to do anything. Oh, I know. The katana was fully sheathed again. Because if you did, you would have the entire might of the Amaji group bearing down upon you. I didn't realize she was that important. Izuku kept his hands up for a moment as he watched Ida's posture relax. Is she like a Yakuza princess? In a way. Ida gave a slight nod. Her family's story is tragic enough. Most of us just want to keep her safe. Something tells me she makes that hard. How observant you are. Ida cracked a smile and glanced down at Izuku. I suppose proper introductions are in order. I am Ida Kiramasa. I'm Tanaka's captain. I'm Izuku Midoriya. Izuku stuck his hand out and met Ida's pale green eyes. It's nice to meet you. This was the second Yakuza he had met that was surprisingly nice. Ori didn't count. He still wasn't sure if she was nice or just nice to look at. Izuku. Ida took his hand and leaned in close. Midoriya. Was it? Yep. This was the second time that a Yakuza member had reacted to his name. Is there something wrong with my last name? No, no. It's perfectly fine. It's just familiar is all. But I'm sure you get that a lot. It's pretty common after all. Ida gave a light chuckle and a smile before taking his hand back. It's not. I was the only one in my school. Izuku raised an eyebrow and stared at Ida for a few seconds. I've never even met another Midoriya. They're more common in Osaka, but that is neither here nor. Ida paused for a moment and shrugged. Actually, I suppose it is there, but most certainly not here. Oh, okay. Izuku glanced around and caught a few more glances of the would-be competitors. He really didn't know what to make of some of them. How many were Yakuza? How many were fighters? How many were both? And where was Ori? Hey, Ida, can I ask you a question? Ida raised a very straight eyebrow and nodded slowly. I'll make my answer as straight forward as possible for you. More straight puns. What caused Ori to lose her inspiration? Tragedy. Ida's smile faded, and he took off his hat for a moment. You might be too young to remember it, but do you recall the great crusade that All Might and the police led against Yakuza that were being designated as villain groups? Izuku nodded. I've heard about it. It happened when I was really little. That's when those three lost their father. 3. Ida gave a slow nod and covered his face with his hat for a moment. I'm sorry, Izuku, but that is not something I have the strength to speak of. And please, a tear slid down Ida's cheek. Do not trouble Ori with your curiosity on this. Izuku swallowed and looked at his feet. Tragedy, huh? And not just once. Ori lost her father around the same time that he did. But Ida said there were 3 of them, yet he'd only seen Ori and Tanaka. And she lost her inspiration 2 years ago. Something happened to the 3rd one. Great. Now he was curious about Ori's family history. Maybe he could get it out of Tanaka pretty easily? He seemed pretty open. Wait, Izuku looked around the area again. Shouldn't we be wearing masks or something? Ida dried his tear and placed his hat back on top of his head. You're thinking of the underground masquerade. That one was based out of Osaka and had a different set of standards than here. Wasn't an underground fight pit just an underground fight pit? I can see it on your face, Ida hummed and smiled. You see, ours is just a bit safer in nearly all regards. And we make more money. How? I'm not at liberty to say. Ida nodded down the hall. Here comes an even more excited Ori. Ida gave another short bow and a wink. I trust everything went well? You bet. Ori grabbed Izuku's hand and pulled him along. Come on, Izuku. I got Raijin a match. Thanks for watching over him, Ida. You want to join us? Tempting though that may be, I'm afraid I'm needed elsewhere. Best of luck to you too. Ida gave a short bow and slunk back into the shadows. Wait, Izuku stumbled for a second as Ori came to a dead stop just to look at him. Just Raijin, not me. Uft, please, you don't look like you can actually fight. She gave a laugh and pushed some of her hair back out of the way, revealing her glowing red eye. There's no way I'd risk scarring up my favorite canvas. She gave him a hungry look that really did a great job of making him feel like a piece of meat, or in this case a hunk of skin. Besides, Raijin qualifies for the heavyweight fights. Heavy. All right, folks. A raspy female voice called out over the speakers. We got a special treat for you tonight. A true heavyweight bout. The cheers flooded over the silence that had once been so prevalent behind the arena. The pounding music stopped and a rumbling took its place. Come on. Ori jumped and grabbed his hand again. This is going to be amazing. Tonight, the champion has returned. From the twisted minds of that pink-haired brother and sister duo. The mechanical menace, the unstoppable bot. They arrived at the top floor of the fighting arena. Lights, wires, and cameras were scattered around the place, and a few more Yakuza guards could be seen up here. Across from him, Izuku saw a large pink-haired man and a much smaller pink-haired girl milling about on a platform just like what he was standing on. Below them, the once small arena was expanding, doubling in size as the crowd moved around, climbing up on whatever they could to get a better look at what was about to happen. The sound of metal scraping against the concrete sounded as something emerged from a pathway into the newly expanded arena. The robot looked like one of the villain bots from the entrance exam had gone through a junkyard and suited itself out with more and more gear before painting over it with a slick red paint job. A massive sword of scrap metal was in one hand, and a shield of hubcaps and slag in the other, while 2 more grabby arms awaited anyone that got close. The bot was slightly larger than Raijin was, but looked less sturdy. Introducing the new and improved Gladiator bot. That's right, folks. This baby's even more deadly than the last time he made an appearance. The crowd cheered as Izuku looked down towards the arena where a blonde-haired woman wearing a biker jacket was having a field day. Ah, so everyone else was crazy here too. And now, before you all dive into a betting frenzy, let's introduce the only thing crazy enough to go up against it. The lights flashed towards them, bringing with them every set of eyes. A collaboration of quirks, a beast yet untested, art given life. Let's hear it for Izuku. Ori shook his shoulders. Let him out. Izuku stuck out his arm and willed Raijin out. He felt the great ape swing into action, its hand pressing on Izuku's arm before his sleeve exploded. Raijin flew through the air, a powerful roar escaping him before he landed with enough force to shake the area. Raijin. The crowd roared, and more than a few whistled. The thunderous ape made not of flesh and bone, but ink and lightning. Now then, get ready to place your bets, because this showdown is set to get started at any moment. On the display, a countdown began as the lights outside of the arena began to fade. Izuku looked at what remained of his sleeve. He probably should have taken it off, or at least rolled it up so Raijin wouldn't destroy it. Was there something wrong with leaving from the palm of his hand, or did that monkey just want to show off? Ori was speechless, her glowing red eye quickly becoming brighter as the lights around them went out one by one, until only the arena light remained, highlighting Gladiator Bot and Raijin. For a few brief moments, it felt like it might be the cover of some blissed action movie with bad CGI, but the roar of the crowd affirmed the reality of the situation. 3, 2, 1. Fight! Raijin pounded his chest, and Izuku felt his blood begin to pump as he let out another roar that shook the stadium. Gladiator Bot surged forward, its one massive wheel nearly burning out as it charged, its massive blade and shield at the ready. Sparks flew as the robot swung wide, aiming for a quick victory. Raijin let out a roar like thunder and spun to the side, dodging the blade and letting out a punch that the bot attempted to absorb with its shield. The shield buckled, bent, and warped as a pulse of sparks shot through the bot's arm. With another roar, Raijin leapt towards the sword and brought both fists down onto the broad side of the blade and shattered it. The bot retaliated with a shield slam to the gut, which forced Raijin back. Izuku placed a hand over his stomach. It didn't hurt, but he could still feel that impact. Did he feel what his tattoos felt? That might be his weakness. Gladiator Bot didn't relent and came at Raijin with all four of its bare arms at the ready. A barrage of punches slammed into Raijin's body, and Izuku felt each one like a light tap on his skin. But Raijin must have felt it more. Raijin roared and slammed both arms down onto the bot's back, then grabbed onto one of its arms. With a thick, stubby foot on the bot's chest, Raijin ripped the arm free from its joints, sending wires, sparks, some strange liquid, and gears flying out. But that wasn't enough for Raijin. With another roar of thunder, he grabbed the arm with both hands and smacked Gladiator Bot in the head with it. Sparks went flying from all over the bot as Raijin leapt upon it, his large sparking hands grabbing onto the bot's head. The sound of metal tearing and crunching echoed throughout the arena as Gladiator Bot's 3 remaining limbs tried desperately to remove the great ape from its body. With one last roar, Gladiator Bot's head was torn off, and Raijin had won his first fight. It was late by the time Izuku got to his mother's apartment, and he had more than enough prize money in his pocket to do whatever it was that he wanted with it. If he got paid like that once a week, he'd be able to pay his way through college and rent his own apartment. It was so much money, and it was just burning a hole in his pocket, begging to be spent. But on what? A new laptop? A giant meal? Better clothes? There were so many things he could spend the cash on, but so few things he actually wanted to buy. Maybe he should just start saving it for something? What on earth did people do with fat stacks of cash they got from an illegal underground fight club? Drugs and alcohol? Neither one of those sounded appealing to him. Considering how he hung out with the Yakuza twice now, that was probably a good sign. Or something. The only thing he did buy was a new shirt on his way home. Hopefully his mom wouldn't notice. He creaked open the door and was greeted by the sound of a dinner long since cooked, though his stomach wasn't complaining at the idea of cold food. Still, it was a bit on the late side, and he didn't want to talk to his mother for a number of reasons. Maybe he could sneak some and just hide in his room for a bit. Izuku. The chill in his mother's voice caught him off guard. Where were you? She stood in the hallway, bathed in the dull light that came from their kitchen. His head was down, her entire body looked like she was shaking, and he could see the tear stains on her cheeks. He scratched the back of his head. He almost couldn't look her in the eye. But he did. He glared at her, challenging her. I went to the movies with Ori. I texted you, remember? Oh, I see. Her mother's voice stopped shaking as she looked up at him with a firm sadness in her eyes that piled on guilt. She presented her phone to him, and a video started to play. So this isn't you? Give it up. For the crowd cheered, and the phone zoomed in on him holding out his arm. Raijin. Inko pressed pause as the camera zoomed in on Izuku's face. Same pants. Same shoes. Same him. Same Ori. Different shirt. No use denying it. How'd you get that? That doesn't matter. She stomped her foot on the ground. Why were you there? Tell me, Izuku. Why were you there? Why were you fighting? Where did that gorilla come from? Why can't you just tell me the truth? You want the truth? He shouted and stomped his foot right back at her. The fake gasp of shock she let out wasn't going to stop him. This is your fault. You didn't let me get a tattoo for my quirk. You're why I failed to get into UA. So what did you make me do? He unbuttoned his shirt and willed Raijin to stand on his chest. You made me desperate enough to go to some Yakuza artist and get this done. Mom, meet Raijin. Inko just stared at his chest for a moment. Her body was still and lifeless for a few moments. Tears began to fall down her cheeks again. Her voice was small, but it was loud enough. Get out. He didn't need to be told twice. He tossed his phone into the first river he found. 10 a.m. Izuku stared at the dull red of the alarm clock for a long time. He had been staring at it since it had first turned to 9 an hour ago, but it didn't feel like an hour. He should get up. The hotel he was staying at required people to be out by noon. Not that he had anything to pack. With a dull groan, Izuku sat up in the bed and then immediately flopped down to press his head into his pillow. Everything hurt. He was so tired. He hadn't slept at all last night. He had showered twice, trying to get rid of the itchy uncomfortableness that spread over his entire body. And when that proved fruitless, he spent the rest of the night alternating between crying, screaming into his pillow, turning, and just fuming over what had just happened. This was all her fault. If she hadn't broken her promise, none of this would have happened. But this was fine too. He didn't need her anymore. It wasn't like she supported his dreams. She only offered support for her dreams. Join a sports club? That'll help him in college. Join a gym? Fit students had better job aspects. Get a tattoo so he could become a hero? Lies and broken promises. Anger spiked and Izuku pushed himself off the mattress. He couldn't lay in bed all day. There were things he needed to do. There was no point going to high school. Finals were over and he was accepted into Tokyo U. And it wasn't like he had any clubs or friends to really make going back appealing. Besides, if his mother was looking for him, that'd be the second place to look. It was why he didn't bother going to Katsuki's place. Their parents were better friends than they actually were, so Mitsuki would probably just snitch on him. Standing, Izuku grabbed his clothes and glared out of the hotel room window as he got dressed. He needed to find a place to stay, something more permanent than a hotel room. But the problem with that was that he was 17 and he'd need to have someone financially back him. Normally, that'd be a parent or proof of employment. Maybe he could talk to the university into not only giving him a dorm late, but also letting him move in early. Money shouldn't be too hard of a problem. He could, in theory, just go to that fight club again and earn some cash using his quirk. But that was illegal, wasn't it? Betting on fights, quirk-based fights in general, there was a reason it was hidden under a warehouse. Besides, would he even be let in without Ori or Tanaka? Ida might let him in. Actually, he seemed to be a pretty popular contender last night, so he might be able to just walk in if he somehow introduced them to Raijin first. Izuku sighed and looked at his bare chest for a few seconds. Raijin was currently on his back and asleep. At least one of them got some rest. If I had had you a few weeks ago, things would be so much different. The fight with the robot last night had proved that. It had sealed the fact that he could have been a hero If only he had been given a chance to use his quirk's full potential. If his mother hadn't destroyed his chances, he'd be going to UA and he wouldn't have gone to that underground fight club. Hell, they wouldn't be fighting. He recessed his forehead against the still cool glass and let out a long sigh before putting on his shirt. It still smelled new from last night, but he'd need more than a single shirt and a pair of pants if he was going to live on his own. His stomach let out a low growl and reminded him of the growing sense of hunger he had been feeling since last night. All right, he finished getting dressed and examined the room one last time. Food, a place to sleep, and figure out how to earn some cash. Again, he was brought back to that underground fight club. It wasn't just that it was easy. There was a bit of exhilaration that brought him back to that spot every time he thought about needing cash. He had been so powerless throughout his entire life that now that he could put up a fight, he wanted more. Was that why he wanted to be a hero? Izuku shook his head and slapped his cheeks. Right, now's not the time to think about this. Let's see where. He reached into his pocket for his phone. It wasn't there. Where was it? Other pocket? Did he leave it on the nightstand? Where? Oh. He threw his phone into the river last night. He still wasn't sure if that was smart or stupid. Could he even get a new phone without his mother knowing? Maybe from a different company. With one last look back, he left his hotel room and headed out into Greater Tokyo. There was a lot he needed to do today and less time to do it. But first, food. Izuku half stumbled into the first ramen shop he found and promptly ordered the largest bowl he could. Part of him was concerned about his now very limited budget, but his stomach was currently trying to eat that part. The bowl was served and Izuku took a few giant bites of the toppings before slurping up the noodles. Yo, Izuku. A slightly jovial voice brought a hungry Izuku out of his bowl just long enough to see a short, orange-haired guy in a suit. He looked familiar. Wait, wasn't this that gate guard for the Yakuza? I've been looking all over for you. Izuku blinked and finished his bite. Why? He blinked again. And how did you find me in the middle of Tokyo? There's like millions of people here. True, but the orange-haired man took a seat next to him without even asking and ordered a bowl. We have our ways. Okay, Izuku turned his attention back to his bowl of ramen. Who are you again? What? You don't remember? I'm Sho, the guy that let you and Tanaka in. I remember that part, I just forgot your name, sorry. Izuku gave Sho another look and wondered how exactly this guy was a Yakuza member. He wasn't as scary as Tanaka or Ida. He just seemed like some friendly young guy. Well, I remembered yours, Izuku Midoriya. There was that emphasis on his last name again. And as for why I spent all night looking for you, only to bump into you as you were heading in for ramen. Well, the answer is simple. Granny wants to meet you. Granny? Izuku blinked. He heard that name before. Is she the boss or something? Sho gave a small nod. His cool, confident smile was smug as all hell. She didn't tell me why, but she's eager to meet you. And I think I can guess why. Why? Curiosity is one hell of a bait. I think if you want to find out, you'll have to come with me. Sho's attention was instantly stolen by the bowl of ramen that was placed before him. After we eat, of course. Don't worry, Mr. Heavyweight Champion, I'll sponsor your bowl too. By the time Sho had finished his first bowl, Izuku had finished his second. Once again, after a fight with his mother, Izuku found himself entering the Yakuza compound tucked into the heart of the Amaji district. Butterflies filled his stomach as he followed Sho. A few members he never met looked at him with curiosity and a bit of malice in their eyes. Was he in trouble because he won against the mech? That was Ori's idea. Was she in trouble? Wasn't she important? It kind of felt like she could just do whatever the hell she wanted. The worst part was that even if he did get in trouble because of her, he'd have to forgive her to get another tattoo. Damn it. Why the hell was he here? So you're still not going to tell me why I'm here? Izuku asked as he glanced around the courtyard. He could see the path that would lead him to the koi ponds and Ori and Tanaka's house. There were a few other paths between the buildings that likely led to somewhere else into the compound, but the main building was positioned in front of him. Traditional in every sense of the word, Izuku watched as Sho took the first few steps onto the wooden pathway that enclosed the courtyard. Nope, that had ruined the surprise. Sho plopped off his shoes and held them up for Izuku to see. Shoes off, head down, and be respectful. You're meeting a Yakuza leader after all. Right. Something that was perfectly normal for a 17-year-old future Tokyo U student to do. just having a casual meeting with a Yakuza leader. The room was traditional in every sense of the word. A large, empty tatami mat floor surrounded on all sides by walls displaying the group's history, from ornate samurai swords to water-painted wall scrolls that looked beyond beautiful and old photos. There was an unspoken significance of this long room, and nothing seemed more significant than the raised platform at the end with a few sitting cushions placed in front of a large wooden circle with a phoenix burned into the middle. Was that this group's symbol? Did Yakuza have symbols? Why didn't he research more about them after being involved with them? Oh right, he threw his phone into the river last night. A crowd had gathered around him. Some faces Izuku knew. Ida and Tanaka hovered around the sides, leaving him in a sea of Yakuza. No one dared approach him for whatever reason. Was he going to die? If that was the case, he wished they'd just get this over with. Once he heard Ori's voice and looked behind to catch her peeking into the room for a moment. Her long silver hair was tied into a ponytail that was kept in place by a baseball cap that had slots for her horns. Both her and her denim overalls were covered in paint. She looked at him and tilted her head to the side again. Izuku? She took a few steps towards him, her sandals effortlessly flying off behind her. She kneeled down beside him and examined the room. What's going on? I have no idea. Oh, what did you do? Well, last night you took me to a fight club and then I won. And then my mom kicked me out last night and I threw my phone in a river. How'd your mom find out? Someone sent her a video. That's weird, but that doesn't explain why you're. An older man stepped in front of them. His kimono was nearly black, and his gray hair still had enough black in it to make his hair look like salt and pepper. His face was firm, dignified, and cleanly shaven, though his skin was a fair bit darker than what Izuku was used to seeing in Japan. The man squatted down in front of Izuku and examined him carefully. After a moment, he smacked his lips. I'm not impressed. Huh. Was he supposed to be impressive? A few snickers came from the other Yakuza members, and Izuku couldn't help but feel this was just some elaborate prank. Whackin', Ori gave a light giggle. That's mean. Besides, you haven't seen Raijin yet. Whackin shrugged and pressed a finger into Izuku's chest. You. Whackin. A clap drew everyone's attention away from Izuku and Whackin and towards an elderly woman. Get out of the way and stop glaring at everyone. You're giving us a bad name. And speak in whole sentences while you're here. We know you're not a foreigner. And Ori, stop being so clingy and let me have a look at him without your dorky face in the frame. Yes, Granny. Ori spun away and stood barefoot next to her brother and Ida. She looked more out of place than he did. An elderly woman smiled down at Izuku. Her black and white kimono made the bright red flowers on it stand out like they were floating. She held herself with the kind of supreme confidence that Izuku would expect the leader of a nation to hold. Her kind face was wrinkled slightly, but still held a youthful playfulness that helped hide the strength of her smile that lacked the usual fragility of someone her age. Her hair was a fluffy black that was pulled back into a ponytail with only a sliver of white on the side. She reminded him of a lone tree definitely growing on a seaside cliff, as though it enjoyed being whacked by salt and winds. She said in a soft tone, head tilting to the side. How you've grown. Though I can't say your father did you any favors giving you my unruly hair. Honestly, I'm nearly into my 60s, and it still won't behave. Though, you did get his eyes at least. Izuku felt his mouth drop as he stared up at this woman. This oh-so familiar woman. He'd seen her before. Well? She asked in a playful tone, holding her arms out wide. Are you going to make an old woman kneel down, or are you going to give your grandmother a proper hug, Izuku? Memory surged forth of a time when he was barely old enough to talk. He remembered holding onto this woman's kimono as he stared out at a storming night, wondering when his dad was going to come home. A tear escaped him as he hugged her tight. Her smaller frame was too stubborn to even budge under his weight as she wrapped her arms around him. I've wanted to see you again for so long. His grandmother whispered softly. We have a lot to catch up on. Wait. Ori shouted and bounced over to them. She looked around the room, her mouth open like she was a little stupid. Are you two actually related? My name is Hanabi Midoriya because I chose it, Ori. Now get. Grandma Hanabi waved her hand and gestured towards the rest of the members too. The rest of you best have something more important to do than to interrupt my family time. As a group, The rest of the Yakuza slowly began to filter out of the room until only Ori and Tonka were left. Holy shit. Tanaka groaned and slapped his forehead. I'm an idiot. Yes, you are, but we can talk about you not telling me Izuku's last name right now. Shh. Ori grabbed her brother's arm and dragged him out of the room as well. Well, Hanabi gave a light chuckle, her eyes looking a bit misty. I'm sure we have a lot to catch up on Izuku. Why don't we go for a walk? And then I threw my phone into the river. Hanabi let out a small chuckle. Her left arm was hooked with his right, and she patted his hand slightly as they made their way through the well-tended garden that was hidden inside the Yakuza compound. Smart move if you didn't want to be tracked, but if you didn't want the data on there to be found, you should have cracked the shell first. They make cell phones so durable these days. It's both a blessing and a curse. Right? His grandmother was the boss of a Yakuza family. Still, Hanabi gave a soft hum as they stopped at a beautiful collection of flowers. For that girl to act like that, she might have been worse off than I feared. Perhaps I should have attempted to reach out to her more. She gave a kind, grandmotherly smile and gave him a wink. Besides sending you cash for your birthday. Izuku let his grandmother's arm slide through his own as she kneeled down to look at the flowers. I suppose this is a bad time to mention I never got anything from you. Not surprising. Hanabi continued to poke at the flowers for a moment. Well, I wish our reunion was more cheerful than it is, but I suppose you've gone your entire life not knowing part of who you are. And that's a long time, even for an old lady like me. She rose with more ease than his mother would have and smiled at him. But starting with the past will get us to the now, so we might properly look to the future, She straightened her kimono and began to take a few brisk steps past him. Come on now, best not to dawdle in my garden. Half the plants in here are poisonous, and the other half will get you higher than a kite. Izuku tore his hand away from the red flower he had been drawn to and took a much better look at the garden. Oh, so that bush he thought might be a pot plant was a pot plant. His grandmother let out a sharp laugh, and he chased after her. So, is this your garden? I said as much, didn't I? Besides, an old lady like me needs a hobby, and gardening does more for me than any narcotic ever could. She led him up along a short path before they arrived back at the main building. It's soothing, and creating new life is the best way to get over the loss of life. At least, it is for me. But there's a good chance I might be crazy. They took their shoes off and entered a smaller version of the large meeting room he had first met her in. They sat at a small wooden table, so worn with use that there were rings where someone had placed a cup of tea every single day. Overlooking the garden and the small pond at its heart, it almost felt serene. After a moment, another member appeared to deliver a letter, a pot of tea, and 2 cups. I had this whole plan about what I was going to say to you, but the moment I saw your face, I saw my son, and all of that went out the window. Hanabi sat up slightly, pouring each of them a cup with the kind of grace that came with a lifetime of such pours. So, I suppose we should start with Hisashi. Mom never told me much about him, just that he could breathe fire, and that he died on the job. Izuku looked at the tea and took a small sniff before he took a sip. Spicy, bitter, and somehow sweet, but it was also good. His grandmother gave a soft smile and nodded. Technically that's right, but she sold everything so short. She probably never told you that he had tattoos either? He shook his head no. Makes sense. She probably saw some sort of a connection between tattoos, and Hanabi gestured to the air around her, everything that happened here. Well, your father had an abundance of tattoos. He loved his ink, just like his own father did. She winked and chuckled at him. A bit poetic that a family filled with men that loved to ink themselves would produce a boy that needed ink for his own quirk. Your father, my son Hisashi. He was strong-willed and honorable. It was because of him that we enjoy the power and influence we do today. When your mother said that he could breathe fire, she was only saying part of his quirk. He could set his body on flame and fight like a devil and even regrow a limb, though he only had a chance to regrow a finger once. He earned the nickname Salamander with our numerous enemies at the time. Apparently, that's some fire lizard. He sounds like a badass. He wasn't a villain, was he? Izuku asked. The idea of his father being a hero felt impossible, but he needed to know if his father was a villain. The question gnawed at him. His grandmother gave him a firm look before she took a sip of her tea. Izuku had never felt so much disappointment radiate off of such a simple gesture. I'll forgive your ignorance, Izuku, but don't think that we're villains. Your father was certainly not. If anything, he was closer to a hero, especially for those close to him. He was a force to be reckoned with, and his only weakness was some green-haired waitress he met by chance. She smiled again and winked. That is, until they had a green-haired baby boy that meant the world to him. To me as well. So his father was neither a hero nor a villain. So what did that make him? A yakuza. Was that better or worse than either of those? So what happened to him? You were so little when it happened, I'm not surprised you don't remember. Hanabi's face fell hard as she winced at whatever painful memories she was recalling. You were 3, maybe 4 at the time. But perhaps you've read about it in your textbooks. A deep, steady sigh escaped her. What do you know about the efforts to purge villainous organizations that All Might spearheaded? Oh, Izuku felt his shoulders slump. That's when Ori and Tanaka lost their father too, right? A short nod. So they died fighting All Might. He muttered mostly to himself. Hanabi let out another sharp laugh. Against him? No. She leaned forward, a vicious smile on her face. Are you ready for a real history lesson? Sure. Oh, come on. Be more excited, Izuku. This is your family history we're talking about. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, I want to know about your real history. That's more like it. She took a rather smug sip of her tea and raised a delicate eyebrow at him. What the officials don't want you to know is that there were yakuza groups that fought alongside the heroes and the police. What? Izuku felt his jaw drop. Why? A common enemy. She waved her hand like it was no big deal. You see, for us yakuza, we thrive when there's order, and, likewise, the law is better when we're the main source of unlawfulness. She gave a big cheesy grin. At least that's what this crazy old yakuza lady thinks. But, way back when, 3 yakuza families banded together with the police and heroes. The Amaji group, the Shai Hasaikai, and the Tokyo clan. Today, those are the only 3 yakuza groups left in Tokyo. Hanabi gave another chuckle. I know it might sound like we were simply taking advantage of the situation, and in a way we were, but there was more to it than that. My husband, that old man leading the Shai Hasaikai, and the brat in charge of the Tokyo clan, the 3 of them agreed that this was something that needed to be done, not just for the good of our own families, but for Tokyo as a whole. What happened? Izuku asked, sitting forward slightly to listen to his grandmother's story better. Who were they fighting against? A man called All for One. He was the Dark Lord of the underworld of the time. Nearly every villainous or criminal enterprise at the time answered to him. So when All Might showed up and started to reduce the crime, the 3 of us decided to switch sides. But even with All Might and police doing the heavy lifting, we still suffered casualties. Hisashi was among them. I think something broke in Inko that day. I could see the heartbreak in her eyes, and I couldn't blame her for wanting to run away. Besides, I had not only my own grief to deal with. I found myself in charge of the Amaji group. I had to guide us and make us stronger, find the gaps in the laws that the police would ignore because it was better to have an organized crime than a chaotic one. A lot of stuff made sense now. Hanabi, Grandma, thank you. Thank you for telling me what happened. Your family, Izuku, and more than that, you're the son of my son. She reached across the table and smiled at him, a kind grandmotherly smile that felt like how freshly baked cookies smelled. If you ever have a question, don't be afraid to ask me. He gave a light shrug. I kind of need a place to stay. Wahaha, that you do. Don't worry, we have more than a few spare rooms in this place, and I've already told the guards that you're allowed in and out as you please. She pointed a bony finger towards him. So take some time and try to relax. That is, relax as much as one can after getting Ori's attention. No kidding. First time I met her, I spent the entire night almost passing out of pain as she put a tattoo on me. The second time she pulled me to a fight club and I got kicked out of my house. Oh, and this would make a third time. Do me a solid and try not to end the world until I'm dead. She leaned back and pulled out a small pipe from her sleeve. Izuku watched as her thumb ignited into a colorful blue flame before she lit the pipe and took a small puff out of it. So, is there anything else you want to know? What should I do about Mom? Hanabi took a long, slow puff of her pipe and looked out towards her garden. I'm a spiteful person, Izuku. Part of me wants me to keep you away from her as long as possible, just like she did to me. But I'm also too old to be thinking that way. My opinion, though, give it some time. Mull it over. Let her come to you. I'll send Sho out to make sure she knows you're safe. You're pretty wise, Grandma. I better be. I'm old as shit. So, I do have one question. She raised an eyebrow and locked eyes with him. Can I still be a hero? I mean, I went to a fight club, and he was cut off by his grandmother's laughter. Your family is Yakuza, Izuku. The door's open for you, but you're not one of us yet. Besides, there are a bunch of heroes that are members of the Yakuza, some big names too. And there's a lot more that have blood ties with us. Can you tell me who? That'd spoil the fun. When they show up next, I'll introduce you to some members. Maybe. Hanabi shrugged again. Well, if that's all, I'll show you to an empty room and give you a chance to settle in a bit. Then we're going to have a barbecue. She raised an eyebrow and looked him up and down. We'll get you some new clothes tomorrow. What else you need? A direction in life? He asked with a shrug. And a laptop? It'd help with school. Hanabi gave another bubbly laugh, and Izuku felt ready to ease into his life at the Yakuza compound. SAE sat as calm as she could in the police car as Sergeant Shio navigated the busy Tokyo streets with practiced ease. His outwardly gruff appearance matched his inwardly gruff attitude in spades. She would have thought that it was just his years that had made him jaded towards everything. But nope. According to his longtime co-workers and other veterans of the force, he was just born that way. Despite her calmness, she couldn't deny the butterflies in her stomach and the bit of bile that had been creeping her way up the back of her throat. Last week, she had been tasked with becoming a liaison with the Amagi group, and to think she'd be put into action so soon. She was thankful that the sergeant hadn't quite retired yet, and that she'd have his guidance for a few more weeks, or longer if he felt like he was needed. Do you really think they did it? SAE pushed her ashen hair behind her ear and watched their location on the GPS. Sergeant Shio gave her a slight glance before he made a turn off the highway. Among the 3 remaining Yakuza groups, the Amagi were the calmest and least volatile, thanks to the niche they had found for themselves after the Yakuza purge. They were content to run their casino, fight club, and a few drug smuggling operations that were largely limited to recreational drugs. They also actively maintained a relationship with the police, in large part thanks to several of the previous police chiefs and other high-ranking public officials being gamblers. It was a notable difference compared to the Shai Hasaikai that was on the verge of collapse due to their unwillingness to adapt to the times, or the Tokyo clan that was closer to a group of roving gangs of kids. Those two were walking the edge of being labeled as villainous groups, which would simply spell their doom. That wasn't to say that the Amagi was some kind of perfect Yakuza group. They had their own problems. The war for the underworld had taken a heavy toll on them, with nearly all of their notable young members being wiped out, leaving them with an aging base that was getting close to retirement. Sure, there was some new blood among their ranks, but with no heir apparent to take over once Phoenix was gone, the group might simply dissolve. Nah, Shio let out a low growl and made a sharp turn that nearly threw SCE out of her seat. Kidnapping isn't in their MO, and it's not like the kid came from money. It's all risk and no reward. Could be that the kid pissed someone off and ended up in a ditch somewhere. You couldn't argue that. The only major altercation with the Amagi group within the last few years was when one of their rare younger members took on a whole division from the Tokyo clan, along with a few more street brawls. Do you think that Tanaka found them? No idea. The car came to a stop, and Shio opened the door and stuck his leg out. But, hopefully, we'll find some answers. The Tokyo clan was too decentralized to have any real compound, and the Shai Hasaikai kept their base of operations a secret. But the Amagi group? Apparently, 2 police officers could just drive up to it and ring the doorbell. No guard this time, Shio muttered as they approached the traditional-style gate to the compound. Maybe one of the oldtimers fell asleep somewhere. It wasn't like Shio wasn't just as old as these guys were. With a sigh, he pressed the button on the intercom and was greeted by a slight crackle then silence. Hey, it's me, Shio. What the hell kind of a casual greeting was that? Tell Granny we need to talk. With a slight yawn, Shio stepped away from the intercom and rolled his shoulders. There was no way she was just going to be able to do that in the future. These guys were still Yakuza, right? Or was this just some kind of glorified Yakuza retirement home? After a moment, the gate was opened. An exceptionally tall and slender man with straight black hair and a slightly creepy vibe stood to greet them. The fact that he had two sheathed katanas at his side raised a few flags, but his otherwise calm and open stance made him look like someone's butler. Not a butler that she'd ever hire. "Ah, Officer Shio, it's been some time." The gangly man placed a hand over his heart and gave a slight bow. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Meet and greet, and a missing persons case. I know that old Spitfire's here. She's never at the casino this early, so take me to her." Shio walked past him and then stopped. "Oh, and Ida. This is Essie. She'll be taking over for me once I retire. She's a good cop, so no funny business." "Ah." Ida extended a slightly elongated hand towards her. His smile was like two straight lines that formed a V. "It's a pleasure, Officer Essie. Please, follow Shio. I'll go fetch Granny." Essie shook the man's hand for a moment and found that while his hand was rough, his grip was gentle. The inside of the Amaji compound looked nothing like what she would expect a Yakuza compound to look like. This felt more like some feudal lord's plot of land, or maybe a historic plot of land. "Oh my." An elder woman came walking out from one of the side buildings. She was dressed head to toe in a gardening outfit, and she looked like she was shaking with every step. Could this woman even walk without a cane? "Shio, dearie, it's been. Quit the act, Hanabi. I know damn well that you can run a marathon." "Oh, come now." The change was instantaneous. The shaking stopped. Hanabi corrected her posture, and her eyes went from the near-blind squinting of an old person to the blinding stare of someone that wanted to know why the fuck they were there. "What's the point of being a feeble old woman if I can't act the part? Uft, I'll give you old, and that's about it." Shio stuck his hands in his pockets and met Hanabi's glare with one of his own before the two smiled and let out a short laugh. "Shio, it is good to see you. How's your wife doing?" "Good, good. She's made a full recovery. I think I'll be taking her to the casino once she's up to snuff again." "Oh, that's good. I always love taking your money. And I love taking yours." "Bribes? What the hell? Were they corrupt? Were they bad cops? Why couldn't she become a hero like her sister?" Sergeant Shio. The case?" SAE tapped on her badge as though to remind him that they were still cops, even if they weren't dressed like them. Being investigators had its perks. "Oh right, Hanabi. This is SAE Tatsuma. She'll be taking over for me once I retire." "That wasn't the case. Please. We both know you're too stubborn to retire. You'll get bored, burn through your money, and be back on the force before the new year." Hanabi waved her hand dismissively, then glanced briefly toward SE. "But what's this she said about a case? Right?" Shio kicked a small stone along the ornate path and shoved both hands into his pockets. "The thing is, we've got a mother who seems to think you kidnapped her kid. So, do you know who Izuku Midoriya is?" Hanabi let out a sigh that seemed to age her 20 years. She shook her head and tossed aside her mud-caked gloves. "Honestly, that troublesome daughter-in-law of mine. She called you?" "Wait, you actually know something about this?" Shio asked, genuine shock written all over his face. "Of course I do." Hanabi threw her hands up and began stomping down a side path. "Come with me, you two. Hurry. My patience just got shorter than my late husband's temper, and he's been dead for years." Startled by the woman's bluntness, Essie quickly followed her through the compound. They broke away from the main building, crossing a small bridge over a koi pond that led to a separate house. She glanced at Shio, who could only shrug. The look on his face made it clear this wasn't normal. "Oi, Ori, bring Izuku out here. Now. We're busy." A younger but equally blunt voice shouted from inside, followed by a muffled yelp. "Oh, come on, Izuku. Toughen up. Canvases aren't supposed to." "Ori, right now?" Hanabi tapped her foot impatiently. Shuffling noises came from inside the house. SAE instinctively rested her hand on the grip of her pistol for a moment. Her heart pounded. What was that scream? Were they hurting him? The door suddenly slid open. A tall woman with snow-white hair and two horns tipped in red stepped outside. The loose clothes she wore were stained with various inks, clinging slightly to her frame. One glowing red eye fixed on them before she stopped in front of Hanabi. "Who are they? Is Tanaka in trouble?" Ori asked, glancing between everyone. "And was it really so urgent you couldn't let me finish? You know how. I know you want to get back to work." Hanabi cut her off with a wave of her hand. "But let these people see Izuku before you two continue." "Oh, was this a relationship thing?" A fit boy came stumbling out from the house, his shirtless form partially covered in sweat and his face a deep red. Oh, it was a relationship thing. On the boy's left shoulder, partially crawling down his arm, was a blackened lizard highlighted in red and wreathed in flames. It moved like it was real, but it had no depth and it appeared to be stuck. Sae pulled out the photo she had been given and sighed a breath of relief. This kid was an exact match to Izuku. She watched as Izuku pulled on a t-shirt, and she caught a further glimpse of the creature on his shoulder. It was a tattoo. That is, an unfinished tattoo. That could explain the scream of pain, right? And that Ori girl, was she a tattoo artist? What's going on, Grandma? Izuku asked, looking more than a little bewildered. Ori hovered around him, flapping her arms in anticipation. And who are these guys? Grandma? Wait, Hanabi did call Inko her daughter-in-law a moment ago, right? How'd she miss that? Oh, right, still a bit wobbly about just walking into a Yakuza base like it was a park. This is Sergeant Shio. He's a drunkard gambler, a cop, and an old friend. Hanabi gestured towards both of them with the flick of her wrist. The girl is Sae something. She's his replacement. And they're here because your mother reported that you were kidnapped. The look that crossed Izuku's face made it very clear that he wasn't with his mother right now by choice, which muddied the lines between right and wrong. Technically, a 17-year-old was able to live on their own, and many did so long as they had financial backing from their family, which Izuku was receiving from his grandmother. I'm sorry. Izuku let out a sigh and went to move his arm, but winced in pain and rubbed his left shoulder slightly. My mom kicked me out a couple of days ago, and I haven't talked to her since. Ah, so that's what's going on. Shio clapped his hands. All right, case closed. What the hell was with this shitty cop? Sae, he let out a sigh and stepped towards Izuku. So, just so we're clear, you're not being forced to stay here? No. Izuku looked between Ori, who nodded yes, and Hanabi, who nodded no. No. I can leave whenever I want. And Grandma took over. Sorry for the trouble. It's no problem. Sae held up her hand and watched as Ori began to tug on Izuku's arm like some incredibly needy lover. But why would your mother kick you out? Izuku let out another sigh. Because I got a tattoo. Oh, that. Felt petty. Sae, come on, we're done here. The kid is safe and with family. There's nothing we can do here, though Hanabi, you might end up getting a call from child services if Inko continues to raise hell over this. Shio let out a grunt and looked back towards Izuku. Make it easy on us and give your mom a call. Izuku nodded. Sae reclined into the seat of their unmarked car as Shio drove them back to the station. Her heart was still pounding. Sure, everyone she met today had been nice, but these guys were still Yakuza, right? And she was supposed to be the one to deal with them in the future. She glanced toward Shio and let out a sigh. Do you think that Izuku kid will be all right? Absolutely. Shio gave a slow nod. And you would do well to form a good relationship with him. Huh. Why? Because he's her grandson, and if I know Hanabi like I think I do, she's already grooming him to be the next leader of the Amaji. Hisashi the Salamander. The more Izuku heard about his father, the more he wanted to meet him. He wanted to judge what kind of man he was. Everyone, even the most jaded of the elder Amaji members, had an abundance of things to say about him. Most of it good, some of it bad, but all of it was spoken with a fondness and a wishing that he was still here. Both for Izuku's sake and the sake of the Amaji as a whole. Hisashi was to be the next leader of the Amaji. He was their hope for the future. And while Hanabi had done her best and had earned every ounce of respect possible, there was a hushed tone that things would have been better if an entire generation hadn't been wiped out. And none spoke louder on this than Hanabi herself. A sharp pain on his right arm brought him out of his thoughts with a hiss. He glanced towards Ori, who was completely absorbed into the work of art she was tearing into his arm. And that's what it really was. A tearing. Ori's quirk functioned by slicing bits of flesh with a knife or a needle and then replacing it with the color she wanted and then burning it back into place. The pain was like getting a paper cut from a lemon and then cauterizing the wound with a fire poker. She had claimed his entire right arm for her next project on him. An entire sleeve made up of dozens of smaller tattoos to make some kind of a flowing piece of art. Right now, she was etching an orchid into his upper arm with beautiful crystalline water pouring out of it. Power-wise, he had no idea how practical it would be. But Ori was passionate about it, and that would make it powerful in its own right. Probably. The way their quirks intermingled with each other was beautiful, chaotic, and terrifying. Izuku took a breath and stared out into the koi pond that served as Ori's and Tanaka's yard. The large multicolored fish swam peacefully in the dark pool of water with a few plants either floating or sticking out of the water. A creature dove into the ground, creating a mound of animated dirt that looked like it came out of a painting and then moved along the ground, headed right towards them. The trail of dirt behind it quickly faded to its original undistributed form. The moving dirt was completely unfazed by the wooden bridge that crossed the pond. With a pop like the crackling of a fireplace, a blackened figure leaped from the animated dirt and then back into the ground. The ground bubbled in front of them for a moment before out crawled his newest tattoo. Far smaller than Raijin, and even smaller than Izuku himself, with 6 stubby legs and a burnt black body that was highlighted by red that oozed heat. The salamander looked at him with a wide, derpy smile, with its orange flame tongue flopped out of its mouth, dripping sizzling orange lava onto the ground. Its thick, heavy tail slapped the ground with enough force to make the rocks around it jump. "I know what you want to call him," Ori said in a soft voice, not once tearing her eyes off of his arm, her needle still ripping apart his arm piece by piece. "He was made with a name after all. You just need to give it to him." "I know. But, should I? Won't that be weird? I mean, he was dead, wasn't he? Wouldn't that be strange?" "Nope. But, not weird." Izuku sighed and then smiled at the salamander, who tilted its large flat head at him and panted like an overly excited dog. "You want to be called Hisashi, don't you?" The tail slapping on the ground doubled in speed, and Hisashi crawled forward, climbing up onto Izuku before he merged with his arm and moved his way up towards his left shoulder, where he took his resting position and turned into an inanimate tattoo. The choice to get a salamander was one born of sentiment and desire. He wanted something to remember the man he knew nothing about. He wanted that connection between this place that his mother had been hellbent on erasing. He still needed to call her. It had been over a day since those cops had come looking for him. The rage he felt at her actions had nearly driven him up a wall. What kind of logic was it that she kicks him out and then calls that he was kidnapped? What was her goal? To get him back? To punish his grandmother? He didn't understand. "Can we take a break?" Izuku asked. He looked towards his shirt and the cell phone that rested on top of him. The phone was new, just like the laptop and clothes his grandmother had purchased for him during a shopping trip. Apparently, even if his grandma ran the Yakuza, the idea of him going to Tokyo filled her with the kind of pride that just made her want to spoil him. 1 SEC. Ori continued to etch a tattoo into his arm with a wide, frantic smile on her face. There was a good chance that she would continue to aimlessly add bits to his arm until one or both of them fell asleep. The concentrated look on her face and the way her hair fluttered in the wind reminded him that she was probably the prettiest girl he ever talked to, and also the craziest. "Ori," he half-whined, "I need to call my mom." Yeah, just one more little, and done." She jumped up and tapped on the first addition to his right arm. "There. It's so awesome watching the water flow like that. Seriously, why is your quirk so cool? I just want to doodle on you all day." She jumped and spun out onto the pathway. Her black sweater was long enough that it completely covered her short shorts, making it look like she was running around without pants. "But I should probably get things ready for class. See ya." "Yeah." Izuku watched her sprint back inside her house before he stood and glanced at his phone again. When was the last time he had to hand dial his mother's number? Ever since he had gotten his first phone, she had simply been mom in his phone, his first contact. With a sigh, he dialed her number and walked along the wooden walkway as he let the sounds of the compound overtake him. The first ring brought with it a calmness that he welcomed with open arms. This was just a check-in. That's all it was. He was old enough that he had no real power over him. Any attempt to force him back with her would be bogged down in courts long enough for him to be an adult. "Hello?" Her voice sounded so frail. And the calmness inside of him vanished as a flash of anger rushed through him. He grit his teeth and forced that anger back. "Hi, Mom. It's me, Izuku." "Izuku, I crossed the line." He hissed. He heard her gasp, and then silence. "You kicked me out, Mom. You denied me a part of myself, in more ways than I knew. You never let me get a tattoo for my quirk, And you never told me about Dad. I'm sure you have your reasons. But I have my reasons too. He tried to keep his voice calm. He had no idea if he was successful. I got a new tattoo. One to remember the dad you never told me about. I'm still going to Tokyo you. But I won't be coming home. I'm going to stay here. With Grandma. The dial tone began to play in his ear. Did she hang up? Did the call drop? He stared and looked up at the cloudy sky for a moment. I love you. What did she say? Nothing. Izuku sat in the same room that he and his grandmother had their talk before. The sound of the rain amplified the atmosphere of the traditional style room and made that freshly brewed tea his grandmother seemed to love smell all the better. They weren't alone this time, as that dark-skinned man with gray hair like a lion's mane Wacken was joining them, a scowl on his face and his arms crossed. The look Wacken gave Izuku made him feel like he was being graded on every choice he ever made, and he had made nothing but mistakes. That's frustrating. Hanabi lowered her head and frowned. Hopefully some time apart will give her a chance to clear her head. She knows where you are, so have her put in the effort. The gate will be open for her. Izuku could only nod. It was weird. Half the time when he thought about her he was angry, the other half he was calm. He both missed her and never wanted to see her again. The only thing that he was certain of was that bumping into Tanaka that day had been one of the best things that happened to him. But today, I'd like to talk to you about your future, Izuku. Hanabi gave a small calm smile. You see, I've been thinking about what you've said to me, about what you don't know what you want to do, and your question about being a hero. The smile she gave him removed a lot of the pressure that those ideas held. Her calmness showed that she really wanted to help him and could, as opposed to his own mother's normally nervous jittering at the idea. I'm aware that the school has counselors to help you make this choice, but they're probably going to push you down some soulless path that doesn't interest you, and you'll end up dropping it and turning into a bitter old woman. Hanabi blinked and then pointed a bony finger towards herself. I'm talking about myself, by the way. I figured, Izuku shrugged. And thanks. It's been bugging me for a while now. I'm not sure what I want to do at Tokyo U. Law would be interesting, I guess, but I don't think people would trust a lawyer with tattoos. Bunch of tasteless fools steeped in tradition, if you ask me, Hanabi growled, slapping the table twice. They just don't respect good art, and Ori's doing an amazing job with you. She let out a hum and scratched her head. Though, just being able to tell those old hags at the saloon that my grandson is a lawyer would shut them up something good. But that doesn't answer what he wants, Wacken said in his low voice that was like walking on gravel. I know that. Hanabi spat and slapped the table again. Let an old woman daydream a little. I've always wanted to be a hero. He spoke softly, almost not sure of the words himself. He did want to be a hero, but it felt stranger than ever to announce that. But? Hanabi asked, pressing her fingers down into the table next to him, her eyes snapping onto him with a cold, hard determination. When he didn't answer, she sighed. There are many reasons why people want to become a hero. Most will say they simply want to help people. All Might is the only one I can think of that truly wishes that. Some do it for their egos, their own ambition, and so others will recognize them. That's why most people are heroes, I'm afraid. Some just enjoy the power. They like to fight, to prove that they are stronger. And then, there are some that simply wish to fly. They desire the freedom to use their quirks and express themselves with it. Oftentimes, those with this desire that fail to become a hero instead become a villain. Hanabi crossed her arms and looked up at the ceiling. It's not so black and white. Some have bits of each, and they all claim to the first one. But they all have their own reasons for becoming a hero. So, Hanabi's gaze felt like the entire world was focused on him. Why do you want to be a hero? His mother had asked that exact same question, but it was different. Why do you even want to be a hero? That memory still felt fresh. Back then he had a reason. He wanted to be like All Might. But now, you don't have to answer right now, Izuku. Hanabi placed a hand on his shoulder and squeezed it gently. The answer might not even be that important. In the meantime, because I have a troublesome grandson that's eager to go to my fight club, Wacken has offered to train you. I'd hardly call it an offer. Wacken huffed and glared at Izuku, his lip curling in a snarl, and his broad shoulders seemed to shake. You're making me do it, and I'm making him. Semantics. Point being, Izuku, Wacken has agreed to give you some combat training if you're interested. Despite how he looks, he's actually a capable fighter, and because of his quirk, he's better than most. Quirk? Izuku asked, looking towards the gruff man that was likely going to be the second greatest source of physical pain soon. I can copy and share memories. Wacken held up a finger to his temple and pulled out a small cloud-like wisp that seemed to be fading rapidly before it vanished. It's hardly free. Everything in that memory gets transferred. The emotions, the pain, everything. It's no substitute for actual training, but it'll get the job done. Right? And I'll send Ida to get Redline. He's a hero that was friends with your father. Izuku looked between his grandmother and Wacken. Thank you for giving him a chance. A chance, huh? Was that why? Hell was a man named Wacken. The wooden practice sword he had been clutching with all his strength was twisted from his hand. With an open palm, Wacken struck Izuku in the chest, and a new memory played in his head. A moment just like this. The sword being ripped out and tossed to the side like it was butter, and the pain of a hand twisting awkwardly. Izuku hit the ground twice and found his mind hazy from having his failure doubled over again. Izuku glanced up at him, a mixture of hate and fear swelling inside of him as he stared up at Wacken. The man's wild gray hair was flared out around his face, making him look like a lion pretending to be a man. Wacken's hard black eyes were filled to the brim with anger and frustration. Pick up your sword. Wacken gave Izuku a small glare before he turned and walked back to the starting position. We are not done. Why? Izuku grabbed the sword and felt his entire body numb with pain for a moment, like it didn't want to take another step forward. Why do you keep sending me those memories? What good would it do for him to fail twice or more every single time? They are failures. Wacken entered the same one-handed stance he had been using the entire time. The wooden sword he used was battered and bruised, but it was only a distraction for his real weapon, that empty, calloused hand that might just be able to take anyone down with a strong enough memory. Okay, Izuku stumbled into his spot and held his practice sword with two shaky hands. Why do you keep sending me failures? Isn't it bad enough that I keep? Oh, believe me, I have complete confidence in your ability to fail. Wacken roared, signaling the start of their bout. A massive wild swing from the sword came down. The bruise on Izuku's shoulder remembered all too well the strike that bore it. The first time he hadn't been prepared. The second time he had barely gotten his sword up. But failures make you stronger. Blocking alone wasn't enough. Izuku brought his sword up and caught the strike as he moved to the side, deflecting it just enough to dodge out of the way. And then there was Wacken's palm. It would come straight on and slam into his stomach. He stepped back and lowered his sword again, whacking Wacken's hand to the side. Now what? Strike? Step back? Hesitation. Wacken shouted. Pain. The round pummel of Wacken's sword slammed into his side and forced Izuku to the side, the bouncy tatami mats cushioning his fall into a rollback onto his bare feet. Wacken did not relent. That wooden sword was coming down hard and fast once more. When you fail, make certain you fail forward. You learn from it. You grow from it. There is no better way to learn than to fail. Over and over again until you find what works. Block and dodge. Parry. Attack. Izuku pressed his sword forward and bumped it into Wacken's shoulder. The strike was awkward, more a tap than anything else, but it was the first time Izuku had landed a hit. Wacken glanced towards the wooden practice sword like it had somehow deeply offended him and then removed it with a light push. A smile that on anyone else would have been a snarl graced Wacken's face as he got back into his fighting stance. Congratulations. You have learned from your failures. Okay, Izuku nodded and held up his sword again. But wouldn't it be easier to just... No, you are not the first to ask me that. Wacken struck, and this time Izuku blocked and pushed him back. Skills and technique, things that are earned through failures, even with natural talent. You fail and fail and fail until you learn, then you fail some more and learn some more. Wacken struck again. This hit once again striking Izuku's blade with enough force to wrench it from his hands. A hand grabbed Izuku's head, and he felt a new memory flood into him. A phantom strike to the hand followed by a kick to the stomach. Every failure I have given you has been their last failure. The final failure before they succeeded and learned. Wacken stomped over to the discarded sword and then tossed it back towards Izuku. With me, You will fail twice as fast and learn even faster. But why can't I use my quirk? Fool. Wacken scuffed and glared towards Izuku. Do you know what the difference is between a criminal and a villain? Izuku felt his entire body blush as he had forgotten for a moment that he was being trained by a criminal. I'm not a villain. I never said you were. Wacken gave a long enough and rested both hands on his sword for a moment while eyeing Izuku. Nor should you think of us as such. We have honor, and so did your father. But do you know what makes a villain a villain? Using a quirk to commit a crime, cause destruction, or just do evil. He half muttered. Despite knowing the answer, he couldn't help but feel like he was wrong. That's correct. Of those three, most law enforcement and heroes only care about the last two. Destroying things is probably the one you'll get hit with the hardest, though being evil is different. Unfortunately for you, you have a large flashy quirk that can easily be used for destruction. Besides, if your giant monkey is off fighting, your body would be defenseless, won't it? Izuku nodded. A lot of what Wacken was saying made sense. Good. Now then, back to the matter at hand. Wacken held up his sword once more, and Izuku felt the bruises on his body whine. Are you ready to fail? He held up his sword, gripping it in both hands. Yes. Then you are ready to learn. Kaga Heights was the name given to a group of buildings that bordered the Amaji district, though they could hardly be considered heights, given how they were among the shortest of all the buildings around. The top floor of the building served as both the home and agency of the pro-hero Red Line. While not a direct member of the Amaji, Red Line was more of an associate, or at the very least they had a mutual understanding that the Amaji couldn't mess with him, and he wouldn't mess with them. Or at least that's how it used to be. A few years ago, Red Line stumbled into the casino and quickly accrued a large debt, and a hero in debt was a valuable asset for the Amaji. Ida glanced up towards the top of the slightly pink building that stood out like a sore thumb from its surroundings. It had been a while since Red Line had done anything of note besides showing up to the casino, losing his money, and stumbling home drunk. The old hero was probably one close call away from retiring. Honestly, Ida had no idea why Granny wanted to talk to him, but if Granny said jump, he'd ask how high. He hummed and tapped his sheathed sword on his shoulder before making his way into the building. I'm sure Granny has a plan for him, just like she did with Izuku. You want me to come with you? Tanaka asked, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Like always, he seemed to draw attention with his bright red skin. Sure, most people were polite, but it was hard not to notice the large, well-dressed man that looked like a demon. I'm not sure why you even followed me, to begin with. Ida gave a slight chuckle and tilted his head back towards Tanaka. Having Tanaka around all but guaranteed a fight, but it also guaranteed a victory. But no, stay here. Oh, in case he tries to run. Got it. Tanaka took a wide stance, one that was ready to spring in any direction at a moment's notice or fall on his ass. Ida could only smile and nod before he headed into the building. Red Line's agency was on the top floor, and the building had just enough floors to require an elevator. It wasn't until Ida got to the top floor of the building that he felt something was off. The air was chilled and filled with a kind of static, but that could just be a side effect of the knot that was growing inside of his stomach that was telling him to turn back, which was all the more reason for him to go forward and look danger right in the face. With a hand on the hilt of his sword, Ida strode forward, long, straight, and firm steps guiding him towards his destination without disrupting his form. Iron. Slightly sweet. A smell Ida was all too familiar with. Blood. And a lot of it. The door to the office was opened. A few scattered papers had made their way into the hallway. Silence fell over the world as Ida made the last few steps to peer into the hero agency. Red Line's longtime partner was laying in a pool of their blood, the office phone in their hands. There were signs of a struggle, but not nearly enough of one. Near the back of the office, Red Line lay, eyes wide, barely breathing, a hand outstretched towards his partner. You and your partner chose your last words poorly. A large, muscular man dressed head to toe in combat gear jabbed a jagged and worn katana into Red Line's heart, forcing the light from his eyes. The hero world will be better off without corrupt heroes like you. The man stood, while Ida still had an advantage in height. The man easily had the more muscular build. A sharp chin, a wide, sinister smile, while black hair and eyes that showed either too much sanity or not enough stood out as the face of someone that had thrown away their humanity. A red scarf and equally long white headband flowed behind this man as he stood to address Ida. For a moment, Ida felt fear. He felt far more fear than he ever had felt in his life, and he shook like the last leaf on a tree. All it took was a breath, and he was steady again. This frightful aura was nothing compared to what Tanaka could put out. The man walked forward, intent on leaving without even saying hello. With his sheathed sword, Ida barred the man from leaving, earning him a serious glare. That man owed the Amagi a lot of money. The man laughed. Amagi? I haven't heard that name in quite some time. I guess I didn't kill enough of you. The hair on Ida's back stood straight. Who are you? Stain. The hero killer. Ah, I see. Well then, Stain, since you've taken the life of one of our debtors, I assume that you'll be the one to take over his debt? It only seems fair. The conflict may well have been written in the stars. Metal clashed against metal as Stain brought down his sword with two hands down upon Ida, only to be met by Ida's blade, the sheath of which had slammed into the window behind him hard enough for it to crack. Even with his quirk helping him keep his sword straight, Ida could feel the raw strength this man possessed. Stain withdrew to ready for another strike, but Ida lunged forward, striking sideways towards Stain's side, who met the blade with a smile on his face. Ah, I see you're more than just some street thug carrying a katana to be cool. Oh please, Ida snorted. If you start talking about studying the blade, I might just cringe to death. That'd be a shame. It's been far too long since I bothered to kill a Yakuza. You all should have been wiped out years ago. Even with one hand, Stain's strikes were still nearly impossible to block. One hand. What was? Biting steel slid across Ida's abdomen as he felt Stain's knife barely graze him. Two could play at that game. Ida drew his second sword and slashed upward, barely hooking his sword onto one of the many thick teeth of Stain's dagger. With a quick jerk backward, he wrenched the blade from Stain's hands. Not bad. Stain laughed and struck again. Even with one hand, he could easily strike as hard as Wacken could. He tossed a dagger at Ida's face. It's almost a shame you're Yakuza scum. Ida expected Stain to move back and strike again, but instead, he lunged forward, sliding past Ida and into the hallway behind him. But not without cost. With two perfectly straight cuts, Ida stuck down onto Stain's back, only to be blocked by that sword again. Just what on earth was with this superhuman strength? Hee hee, the way you swing your swords, that's your quirk, isn't it? Stain laughed as he grabbed the dagger Ida had tossed behind him. A long lizard-like tongue slithered out of Stain's mouth and wrapped around the dagger, licking up the blood. What a creep. That's right, my quirk isn't anything special. It just allows me to make straight lines when my breathing became hard. His arms felt sluggish, and his legs felt like they were made of rocks. Your quirk? That or you're just freezing up. Stain gave a light laugh as he moved forward, that dagger gleaming in the fading light. Congratulations, you get to die with some wannabe heroes. I guess that would make you some wannabe-ya. Ida. Tanaka came barreling around the corner with all the force of a rampaging bull and slammed into Stain with enough force to send the muscular man tumbling back down the hallway. Ida. Tanaka looked towards him. His tiny black eyes were widened to the maximum as his broad chest puffed and huffed. I saw you break the window. Are you okay? Why aren't you moving? Who was that guy? Did he take the stairs? Stupid question. Of course, Tanaka would run up several flights of stairs and barely be winded. Stain's quirk. Ida barely muttered. He found himself smiling. Paralysis. With Tanaka here, he was safe. Stain, on the other hand, was in for the fight of his life. In addition to being a natural brawler, and most people barely being able to fight Tanaka thanks to his frightening appearance, his quirk was something of an enigma, and so far it hasn't been given an official name. But at the same time, the quirk was as simple as Tanaka. Unless he was beaten in a single hit, Tanaka would not lose a fight. He lived for fights. It was why everywhere he went, he ended up getting into some brawl or another. Or he called it too stupid to die, and that was a pretty apt description. There was no way someone like Stain could ever hope to beat Tanaka. Oh shit, that guy ran away, Tanaka muttered as he peered down the hallway. I wanted to beat him up for stabbing you. Or Stain could do the only smart thing against Tanaka and run away. Revenge was like eating a poisonous pufferfish. Prepared by an amateur, it would lead to a painful death, but if prepared by a professional, there was nothing more satisfying. Hanabi smacked her lips as she stared at Ida, his head bowed low and his suit still bearing the cuts from his encounter a few hours ago. They had been so close to losing one of their most reliable members, and right now was the worst time for something like this. She had just gotten izuku, and the Amagi could hardly suffer the inconvenience right now. And her ancient bones were telling her this was just the beginning. The other members, many of whom were old bastards with one foot in the grave, glanced at her like she was supposed to fix everything. It took everything she had just to keep things running smoothly and prepare for the future. "Tell me his quirk again," she said in a cold voice as she placed a firm hand on her knee to stop it from shaking. Rage was tearing through her like a forest fire as she thought back to her husband and the self-righteous prick that used the chaos to murder so many of her friends and family back then. "He licked my blood, and I was paralyzed." Ida kept his head low, not by her own command, but by the overwhelming sense of honor the boy carried with him everywhere. It was good that he lived. Izuku was going to need an ally such as him in the future. He even took a risk to get the knife back to do so. Stendhal. So she was right, and that prick hadn't died years ago. Well, if they're really Stain, I'm not sure we have much to worry about. He's called the hero killer for a reason. We'll just have to warn Fourth Kind and Gang Orca and hope that they're able to deal with him. Hiruzen scratched his chin and let out a long sigh. Though, him showing up might make things harder on us with more cops and heroes running about. Hanabi gave a small nod and sighed. Send someone to them right away. Unlike Redline, we can't afford to lose either of them. And I want everyone here on high alert, too. Do you really think he'll target us? Ukai asked. His wizened and cracked face showed far more life in it than his body actually had left. He's the hero killer. Most of you old shits should know better than that, she snapped, glaring at them all as she felt the heat of her quirk flare up around her. She let out a breath of hot air that made her eyelashes curl. Think back. Stain's killed Yakuza before. He's killed our own damn members before. Just because that son of a bitch has a different name now doesn't mean he's not that same bastard Stendhal that took advantage of the chaos and murdered just as many of us as that prick All for One did. Her husband was among the first he killed. We're going to treat this as a declaration of war, she said firmly and glared out past everyone towards the Tokyo skyline. They had been far too passive for far too long. No doubt if those scavengers in the Tokyo clan heard about this, they'd take the chance to strike and claim even more territory. They were already far too close to the casino than Hanabi liked. Reach out to all the heroes in our territory, tell them what happened, and that will be investigating him as well. But how do we find him? Hiruzen asked. He's been wanted for years now, and if the police haven't been able to. Did you lose your spine along with your hair? If he's still here, we'll find him or he'll find us. Everyone travels in groups of 3, and if possible, we'll have Tanaka fight him. She grabbed the fabric of her kimono and bit her lip for just a moment. She wanted to tell him to bring that bastard alive so she could burn him to a crisp herself. But that was risky. You find him, you kill him. End of story. She couldn't risk losing Izuku to that monster. So much rode on him, but he wasn't ready yet. And there was no way in hell she was going to risk Izuku to a monster like Stendhal in the hopes it would help him grow. Every time she spoke to him, she could feel that he was being pulled closer into the family. He wanted to help people, especially those he cared about. She just needed a safe way to show him that he didn't need to be a hero to do that. An ambitious leader that wanted to do the right thing was exactly what the modern Yakuza needed in the world of heroes. That, or she was just going senile. Granny. Sho's soft voice brought her attention to her right as the well-dressed boy with beautiful orange hair kneeled down beside her. He looked nervous, rare for someone like Sho who had more time than anyone to hone his skills. He held up one hand to signal to her and the others that what he was about to say was urgent. The clamor that had filled this room was drowned out, so only the general popping and creaking of old demers could be heard. A branch of the Tokyo clan has started attacking our members north of the casino. Her bones were screaming at her that they told her so. Of course those punks would start with this shit now. In her anger, she stood, a wing of flame extending out of her arm for a moment. Senwaken, take Tanaka and push those self-righteous punks back across the river so far they'll be in China. There went her plans of having Tanaka protect Izuku and Ori. Also, Sho said in his usual calm voice. He pulled out a small vial that he was keeping in his pocket. We found someone trying to sell this in our territory. They said they got it from the Shai Hasaikai. Her hand shook as she grabbed the vial. She knew exactly what this was. The vial held a dose of Trigger, a quirk-enhancing drug that could make even weak Quirk strong, all at the cost of a bit of sanity. To say it was illegal would be an understatement. Every country in the world had a ban on the stuff, and there was an entire international group targeted at eliminating its use. To be caught with the stuff was to instantly be considered a villain, and to distribute the stuff, let alone manufacture, that was a one-way road to a cozy cell. Damn that old fart. Hanabi roared and handed the vial back to Sho. Get rid of that, and someone get me in contact with the Shai Hasaikai. When it rained, it poured. And right now it felt like a goddamn monsoon. Izuku wasn't exactly sure what he thought about Ori. Sure, he thought that she was easily the hottest girl to ever know his name, and there had been a few cute girls in his high school class. But Ori just had this dangerous beauty to her that was just amplified by the controlled craziness she showed off. And she wasn't afraid to show off either, especially her tattoos, which meant that Izuku was very familiar with the simple, undeniable fact that Ori had some top-tier thighs. And he wasn't even a thigh guy, he was more of a boob guy, not that Ori didn't have boobs. She did. She was probably the bustiest girl to ever talk to him. But just thinking that she was really attractive didn't really define what he thought about her. And sure, he liked her. But why? Was it just because they spent so much time together? Because she was pretty? Because she was always excited in her own slightly malicious way whenever she saw him? Was it because she gave him tattoos? That last one might be a big part of it. The way their quirks just worked together felt like it was more than just a simple coincidence. But maybe it was her passion, her wonderful, bubbly personality that was both frustrating and endearing at the same time. To top it off, she was easy to read. When she was bored, her face all but shouted it, and when she was interested in something, her red eye would glow slightly. But despite all those positives, she was also really bossy and just enough of a bitch to be called bearable. And she appeared to enjoy causing people pain and misery. And while he'd call Ori a friend, he wasn't sure if that's all she was. Part of him, that horny hormonal teenager part, wanted to know what it was like to kiss her. Ori hummed as she brushed off his bare arm. At this point, his right arm was well on the way to being called a proper sleeve. The detail felt like something out of a movie, and he could recall every leaf painfully carved and colored into his arm as Ori did her thing. By this point, he was pretty numb to the pain, as if he completely forgot his arm existed. All right. He watched as Ori sat her needle down and then stood to stretch. The flowing black sundress she was wearing twirled as she spun, her tall stature allowing her fingers to touch the wooden beams of the awning. That's enough for today. She bounced, spun, and danced as though to get every single joint of her body moving. She pulled on her ponytail and pulled it loose, letting her pure white hair flow freely down her back before she shook it back into place with a wide smile on her face. I work any more on your arm and my brain's going to go blah, and then I'll go blah, and then I'll make blah, and then you'll be like blah, and then we'd be like blah, and then I'd just go super ultra blah. And that's not fun at all. Izuku blinked before he grabbed his shirt and began to put it back on. He was still sore from Waken's training earlier, but he was starting to feel pretty good, especially his arms. But oddly enough, his right arm didn't hurt quite so much anymore. Did Ori's quirk heal the skin it altered? That made sense. So you're saying that if you keep working on something, you'll get burned out? Yeah, pretty much. Breaks are super important. She placed a hand on her stomach and twisted her face slightly. Hey, since they're having a meeting about boring stuff, why don't we go get some food? Oh, and go to the movies. I haven't done that in forever. Dinner? And a movie? Was this a date? Come on, it's no fun going by myself. And my friends are. Actually, do I even have any of those? Ori pulled his arm and then stopped, one eyebrow raised as she looked at him for answers. Do Ida and Sho count? Izuku asked, stumbling to his feet as Ori dragged him away from the only exit he knew of in the compound. And your brother? And where are we going? Shortcut. Ori proclaimed without a care in the world as she bounced over to the wall that surrounded the compound. A small ladder was placed against the wall that would allow for someone to climb over. And I guess they count. But Sho's always busy, which is weird because he never sleeps. And Ida is, well, he's close, but he was never the closest to me and Tanaka. Who was he close with? Izuku watched as Ori climbed up the ladder first, completely unafraid that he might look up her skirt. Ori stopped at the top of the ladder and pulled herself up onto the wall, then looked down at him for just a moment before turning to face the daylight. Our older brother. She took a few whimsical steps along the wall before she looked down the other side and jumped. The loud banging told Izuku that she had landed on something. He scrambled up and quickly saw the container. She had used a stepping stone to get down onto the street, and he followed after her. "Can I ask you about him?" he asked when he caught up to her. The aimless way she was walking made him just a bit worried. "Sure, I guess. I'm sure someone would tell you if you asked them." Ori balanced along, weaving around the street posts with ease. "And it's not like it's a secret or anything. We just don't like talking about it. Especially Ida." "Why? Was he close to your brother?" "Yep. Ida was my brother's best friend. And Ida loved my brother a lot." She turned and looked at him with one bright blue eye. "With all the homo." "Huh." Izuku blinked before realization hit in. "Oh, Ida's." "Yep. But my brother wasn't. So it was kind of awkward for him. Eventually, though, my brother got married. I think she was from some other family or something. I didn't get to spend much time with her, but eventually, something happened to our brother and his family." Ori stopped at the corner, hands behind her back as she looked up at the sky between the towering buildings. A tear slid down her face. "I don't know the details, but apparently all three of them vanished." "Three?" Izuku asked, standing beside her. Would it be too much to brush the tear off her cheek? He extended his hand out, but stopped when Ori wiped it away on her own. "Yeah, they had a baby girl. She kind of looked like me." Ori gave a great, big, cheerful smile. The light changed before he could say anything, and she grabbed his arm, pulling him across the street. "Now come on. I think there's a good movie showing soon, and I want to get a giant popcorn. Maybe two." His stomach agreed with that. Holy crud. Izuku placed a hand on his stomach and let out a slight grunt as he walked alongside Ori, her blue eyes shining in the artificial street lights that made the stars all but a distant memory. The burp that followed was accompanied by a deep blush. "I didn't think I was that hungry." Was he stressed or something? It would make sense. He was a teenager that effectively ran away from home and was currently trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life and having to deal with the fact that his grandmother ran a Yakuza group. But he had been eating a lot lately. Like, a lot. Was it his quirk? "You can probably blame me for that." Ori took a lopsided step and bounced against his shoulder before stepping beside him. Her hand tapped his shoulder lightly, while the other touched his back, where Raijin's resting state was located. "The first time I was inking you up, I thought it was a shame that this canvas was so small. So, I wanted to give you a boon that would help you grow a bit. Kind of pointless since I can ink you as much as I want because my babies move out of the way, but hey, you might as well enjoy it." "Wait." Izuku jumped away from her and glared at her for a second, though the pure joy and general aura of smugness she was radiating made him stop for just a moment. "So, you used your quirk to make me hungrier." "No, I think that's just a side effect of you going through a growth spurt." She cupped her boobs, and Izuku forgot what they were talking about. "Like when I grew these babies. I ate as much as you did. Was kind of worried I was going to get fat, but I didn't. Well, besides my tits." She laughed and bounced over to him again. Standing at her full height, she gestured for him to do the same. Her red eye was glowing like all the stars they couldn't see. Look, you're like half an inch taller already. And as someone that sees you shirtless a lot, you're getting a bit buffer." "Huh." Izuku looked at Ori. She didn't seem any less tall than normal, and he certainly didn't feel any buffer. "How can you tell? I haven't seen any change at all." "You're my favorite canvas." Her fingers grazed his cheek as she gave a bubbly laugh. "It's only natural that I notice even the slightest change to you." She blinked and smiled at him. That sounded far less creepy in my head, but it's the truth. She pushed off him with a light shove and spun on her feet again, causing the hem of her dress to rise for just a moment. "So, if that's true, how tall will I get?" She was going to give him a vague answer, wasn't she? Don't know, probably taller than me, but shorter than Tanaka. She stuck her hands behind her back and looked up at the night sky, where a few clouds were roaming in. Though, you should probably keep working out, mostly because Wacken would be annoyed if you didn't. Not that he isn't always annoyed. I think he hates me, but that might be because I gave him a rabbit tattoo when I was little. A rabbit? Yeah, it's supposed to make him faster. Ori waved arms around, and they continued on their way back to the compound. But really, what did he expect to happen? I was like 13 or something. Oh, I've been meaning to ask. If your boons are real, why don't more of the members have a bunch of tattoos from you? I mean, I only really know of Tanaka's. Izuku scratched the back of his head and hopped to Ori's side, though he did stay a step behind her, mostly because he didn't know the way back. And he really hoped Ori did. Most of them already have their own tattoos. You know, the classic Yakuza stuff. Ori grabbed the air and made a gross face. That, and they have old and wrinkly skin and stuff. It's not fun to work with. And as for the guys like Ida and Sho, well, I did say that my quirk makes it extra painful, right? Izuka nodded. That's putting it lightly. Yep, you're the only person that actually wants more than one. Ida has a hawk on his shoulder, and he still thinks that it was the worst thing he ever experienced. And Sho heard Ida's screams and decided he doesn't need one. I had to force Tanaka to let me put a second one on him. Ori gave him a light smile. But you have a pretty high pain tolerance considering how you're putting up with me doodling in your arm by carving your skin off. Izuku just shrugged. It still hurts like hell, but I've been wanting to get a tattoo for so long that I was willing to put up with some hot sadist chick pinning me down and carving a monkey into my back. Oh, so I'm hot, am I? That's what you're stuck on, and not the sadist part? Ori moved in close, her red eye glowing as her smile spread into one that was so smug it could conquer the whole damn world. But you think I'm hot. Izuku let out a frustrated noise that was a bizarre fusion between grunt and sigh. Yes, you're hot, but do you really need me to tell you that? Nope, but it's nice to hear. She gave a sly snicker that only made Izuku more embarrassed. It honestly felt like he was in middle school getting bullied by an upperclassman. But don't worry, your secret is safe with me. I really doubt anything is safe with you. Damn, no wonder you got into Tokyo U. You're pretty smart. Yeah, the light-hearted tone vanished in the silence that followed. So how did you get in? And how did you decide your major and stuff? I mean, you're already great at art. Thanks. Ori paused at a crossroad and flapped her arms twice before she took a turn towards the left. They were either lost, or she was just wandering around aimlessly. He didn't know which one was worse. But, are you just asking me how I made up my mind so you can make up yours? Kind of. I'm also just curious. I guess that's fair. She ran her hands through her snow-white hair and let out a sigh. I can't really say there was much of a question about what I was passionate about. I mean, when Granny offered to pay my way through college, I just kind of accepted it. And it's not like I can't improve my artistic abilities, you know? Sorry, I don't think that me just knowing what I wanted to do is going to help you. No, it is. I'm kind of jealous that you have something like that, though. I mean, like, something you're super passionate about. He stared at the ground for a second and barely caught a glimpse of Ori taking a sharp turn down a side road without warning. He used to have something like that. Being a hero was what drove him, and had done everything he could to make that dream come true. But since he couldn't get into UA, saying that was his goal felt like a half-truth. He could have just waited until he was of age to get tattoos. He could have taken the alternative routes towards becoming a hero once he had gotten his tattoos. But he had wanted them now, and they were beyond worth it. Not only had that design brought him to his own family, but he had tattoos that were beyond simple tattoos, and he had met so many people that wanted to help him grow. And he had met Ori. So what was it that was pushing him forward? Why wasn't he diving headfirst into courses that would help him as a hero at Tokyo U? They weren't a hero school, but they had plenty of classes that could help a would-be hero, even just picking a subject with the hopes of one day teaching at a hero school. There were so many options. You make it sound so simple. Ori laughed and turned down another side corridor that snaked between the back streets of the buildings. The light here was dim, and the space was tight. It was starting to feel more and more like some kind of passage to a hidden world. She paused at a large empty wall lit only by a single lamp post and pulled out a can of spray paint. Graffiti was a crime. But from the moment Ori began to paint with that red paint, Izuku was captivated. With lines more clear than what he could manage with pen and paper, she created a flaming bird rising into the sky. Its body looked to be made of either ink or fire, maybe both. It was the symbol of the Amagi, only larger, more beautiful, and simple. I mean, it kind of is. I have this constant desire to create, especially tattoos. And when I can't, it gets to me pretty hard. I spent years wanting and needing to create, only to be unable to think of anything. She spun to face him, her long white hair flowing behind her and catching the dim light of the streets. I guess I never really thanked you for saving me from myself. Who knew a canvas could? Death dropped from the sky. The shadows seemed to cling to the hulking figure with wild hair that was staring at the Amagi symbol with nothing but malice. He brought up a hand to his face and touched the white mask he wore around his face, specifically the nose. With a hiss like the gates of hell had opened up, this man said one word. Amagi. Run. He needed to run. Why couldn't he run? Ori, what was she doing? She was staring at the man too. Her face was devoid of color. She was just as afraid. I made an oath, the man said in a harsh, raspy voice as he drew a long, jagged sword from his back. Years ago, that I would rid this world of the trash. Maybe, just for tonight, Stendhal will return and finish what he started. Move. Why won't he move? Stendhal, or whoever the fuck this guy was, swung his sword down towards Ori. Move. He wasn't going to let her get hurt. He heard his pants leg rip as a large ape-like fist lit up the alleyway, pushing Izuku forward. A roar escaped him, driving him forward as he slammed into Stendhal's side. It was like charging at a brick wall, but he managed to hit him into the Amagi symbol for just a moment. Ori, he shouted even as Stendhal pushed him away. Izuku tackled him again. This space was too small to bring out Raijin. He'd have to rely on Hisashi. Run. I'll hold him off. Humph. The white-hot pain of a dagger digging into his shoulder blade made Izuku scream again. It's a shame Stain's not here right now. Stendhal's voice was calm, cool, and even. He might let you live for trying being a hero. A knee slammed into Izuku's stomach as he felt the dagger get pulled out of his shoulder. But, if you're saving Yakuza scum, then I need to kill you. Hisashi. He wouldn't come out. Oh no. Did the stab to his shoulder kill his tattoo? Or stun him? Stendhal held up his blood-soaked blade and ran a long red tongue from one end to the other. That tastes different. His body wouldn't move again. This time it wasn't from fear. It was just he couldn't move. A quirk? It started when Stendhal licked his blade. That wasn't good. I'll start with you first, Stendhal said in a calm voice. Mostly because you remind me of someone I once killed. And I'm feeling nostalgic tonight. Move. Raijin. Hisashi. Ra. Ori screamed, a knife in her hand as she charged at Stendhal. She cut along his arm, her red eye glowing and sealing the wound instantly. Fuck off, asshole. Guh. Stendhal hissed and slammed Ori with enough force to send her flying into some trash bins. He hissed in pain and grabbed at his arm. The long, narrow wound along his arm had been sealed completely. Ori had given him a tattoo, a long, jagged, ugly tattoo filled with rage. Izuku sure as hell hoped it hurt. With a devil-like growl, Stendhal glared towards Ori before returning his attention towards Izuku. I don't like to play with my meal, so I'll end you now. The sword that would end his life was raised high up into the air, and then was brought down. His arm moved on its own, and his sleeve tore as Hisashi emerged from his skin. The inky black salamander glowed a warm red as it bit towards Stendhal's sword. The blade sunk into Hayashi's soft skin like a knife cutting through jello, but it never reached Izuku's skin. Hisashi lunged forward, swallowing the blade whole and aiming for Stendhal's hand. With a bite that sent embers flying, Stendhal was forced to let go of his sword or lose his hand as well. Ink. Stendhal hissed as he grabbed another long, jagged knife. It tasted like ink. Izuku felt his right arm. He could feel the numbness fading as he felt Raijin moving along his body. He might not be able to bring Raijin out in such a small space, but he could bring out a part of him. Living mural, fist of the thunder god. With a roar that would make Raijin proud, He pulled back a clenched fist before he swung forward. Izuku felt the other sleeve of his shirt explode as his arm was completely enveloped by one of Raijin's massive meaty fists. Sparks tingled as his fist slammed into Stendhal's stomach with the sound and force of thunder. The brick wall Stendhal slammed into shattered, but he still stood, his eyes a pure, milky white. What the hell was it going to take to bring this guy down? Izuku. He looked away down the narrow street to see someone running towards them, but the voice was familiar. It was Sho. Stendhal lunged to the side, running past Ori as she crawled out from the trash. Before Izuku could even think to move his legs, that monstrous murderer had vanished into the darkness. Sleep would not come easily knowing that he was still out there. But, at the same time, Izuku couldn't help but smile. He had won. Holy shit. Sho ran up to him and looked at his outfit. I swear, you're lucky I'm good at finding people. You both look terrible. A few drops of rain caught Izuku's attention more than the already numbing pain in his shoulder. Then the downpour happened. Seriously, you two, don't go running off. Sho pulled out an umbrella and handed it to Ori. Follow me, the car's not too far away. The warm blue fires of his grandmother's Quirk soothed the ache and pain of his brief fight with Stendhal. He was sitting shirtless in an underground room inside the Amagi compound that served as a treatment area. Despite the near-death encounter, even though he knew he should be shaken, stirred, and otherwise distraught, his heart was absolutely pounding with the rush of victory. He had beaten a murderer, a psychopath, a villain. Even if the guy got away. Even the fear that Stendhal might one day return to try and finish the job did nothing to temper the giddiness he was currently feeling over that encounter. It was reckless, it was a bit frightening, but he was already looking forward to his next real fight. Another chance to get his blood pumping again. Another chance to prove that he could fight. Only his grandmother's silence kept his excitement and pride muted. Hanabi walked between Ori and himself, her black eyes smoldering as though they were the only window to the fury hidden laying just underneath her calm and tranquil surface. His mother would have been crying, brawling, yelling, and blaming herself, leaving the message confused, foggy, and unclear. His grandmother's silence left no questions. She was furious at them. She was disappointed in them, and this was their fault. With a scowl that could frighten monsters, Hanabi addressed both of them for a second before she continued her slow and steady pacing. Can you hurry up and yell at us? Ori whined. Her arm was wreathed in the blue flames of Hanabi's quirk. The wounds she had gotten were minor and non-life-threatening, but her wrist had gotten broken and was going to be in a cast for a few weeks. The waiting sucks now. A swift flick to the ear shut Ori up. You. Hanabi snapped. The orange flames on her shoulders flared slightly. Tell people where the hell you're going, you stupid girl. A flick to Izuku's own ear was soon followed. And you. Don't go following around some girl just because she's pretty. I know you got a brain in there, so use it. Hanabi growled and continued her stride before she flicked Ori on the forehead again. And no graffiti. We're not a street gang that goes around tagging random brick walls. Okay, I get it, sheesh. Sorry I almost got us killed by having fun. Ori rubbed her head with her good hand and whined. But how are we supposed to know that you were putting us on lockdown, and that there's some weird psychopath out there that wants to kill us? It's not like we're invited to your meetings. You're right. His grandmother spoke in a soft but firm voice as she placed a warm hand on both their shoulders. From now on, you'll be attending the meetings, Izuku. When available, school comes first. Ori, you too. Like it or not, you're both family, and what we decide affects you. She glared at both of them for a few seconds before she sighed. Especially after tonight. Like it or not, Stendhal will be after you because you are part of the Amagi. And don't think just because you beat him once he'll be a pushover. Her gaze softened, and she looked Izuku right in the eyes. Your grandfather once thought the same thing. His grandfather? That guy had killed his grandfather? And before you go off on a damn crusade over some old fart you never met. The blue flames flowed back up into his grandmother's hand where she held it there as it slowly turned to a warm orange. Remember, I get dibs. And I'll kick your ass if you do anything reckless. Silence. The fire exploded around her hand. Well? Yes, ma'am. Izuku let out a light squeak and sunk down into the medical bed. Good. The fire vanished, and the room seemed so much dimmer now that it was gone. I'm happy you're both alive. My healing fire isn't the best, but it should cover your cuts and bruises well enough. Bones and pride. Hanabi made a face and shrugged. Not so much. Oh, Ori snapped her unbound fingers and pointed towards Hanabi with a wide smile on her face. I marked him. Hanabi gave a pause and tilted her head to the side. Marked? Yeah. You know how when I use my tattoo on people it hurts like shit, and I'm normally really slow and thorough, and then sometimes they get a boon or something. The lone silver eyebrow that Hanabi raised told the whole damn world to hurry the fuck up. Well, I did that to him. On his arm, a really long cut. I think it's really going to hurt him, so you might be able to find him with that. Ori gave a great big smile and flopped back down onto the comfortable hospital bed. There wasn't a single mark from his grandmother's healing blue flames. You can thank me. I'll thank you by not kicking you out. Hanabi snapped her fingers back. Still, good thinking. I'll put the word out. Which arm was it? Ugh. Ori pursed her lips and squinted up at the ceiling. Left. Hanabi looked towards Izuku, that same eyebrow now demanding answers from him. I was too busy getting stabbed for the first time to really notice. He shrugged. The phantom pain of that dagger sinking into his shoulders still lingered. The cut had been shallow with Hisashi taking the brunt of the damage. Did Hisashi partially emerge to intercept the blade? Or was it just because that's where Hisashi was on his skin? But I think it was the left. Well, that might help us find him, especially if the mark you left him is as painful as a regular tattoo. Either he's sane enough to seek medical treatment for it, or he's insane enough to try and peel it off in the first place. Hanabi gave a smile that was far more Yakuza matriarch than it was kindly grandmother. Thinking about that freak peeling off his skin to try and get rid of your tattoo is going to help me sleep tonight. And with that, Hanabi left. Her pace was brisk, judging by the echo of her footsteps in the underground portion of the complex. Hey, Ori sat up and bounced on the bed as she looked at him. Her blue eye shined in the dull fluorescent light. Let me see your back for a second. I want to see if Hisashi is all right. Same with Rajan, but I don't think he got cut. Oh, Izuku nodded, removed the plain shirt he had been given once the bleeding had stopped. The motion of taking his shirt off for Ori was one that he had grown far too used to performing in such a short period. He honestly didn't know if his tattoo could be damaged in any meaningful way. If they get damaged, do you think you can fix them? Sure, it's just like making an edit or ranking. It'd probably hurt a lot still. Or half mumbled as she moved closer, her fingers touching his shoulder as she normally did whenever she was about to cut him up. Well, I don't see a scar on your skin, so I guess Granny took care of that. But I'm not seeing any wound on Hisashi, which is good. It sucks trying to cut with my left hand. Yeah, I guess that means no more ink sessions for a while, huh? GUH, don't remind me. I'm already getting the itch to ink you up something fierce, but I don't want to do a shoddy job. Maybe something tribal, but probably no big projects for a bit. Well, look at it this way. He smiled and looked up towards the ceiling. You can save up all the inspiration for later. Why do non-artsy people always think that? There is no inspiration bank. I mean, I can have all the ideas in the world, and motivation can be substituted with discipline. But inspiration is like a really pissy cat. I try to keep it for too long, and it claws the fuck out of my eyes. If I ignore it, won't come back for a while. Izuku didn't really get it, so he just nodded. Her fingers felt cold against his skin, and it was taking all of his mental fortitude not to think erotic thoughts about this scenario. Ori hummed her breath, touching his bare skin. Her fingers left tingling trails of hot and cold as she moved over to look at Raijin. He looks wait. She grabbed his right arm roughly and stared at it with a wide eye and rubbed his forearm aggressively for a moment. What the hell is that? Huh. Izuku looked at his arm, nestled into a white lotus that served as the base of a waterfall. Ori had etched into his arm was a jagged sword. Stendhal's sword. The sword that Hisashi had swallowed whole to protect Izuku. They both stared at the sword for a long time, watching as the lotus spun slowly. What the fuck? How did that get in there? That sword was a real-world object. Just what was his quirk exactly? I have no idea, but one day I want to get high as hell and just fucking watching your quirk. Ori placed her finger against the lotus and watched as it curled around the sword, blocking it from view. She met his eyes, Her glowing red eye revealed itself, which Shy pushed her hair back over her horn for a second. I fucking love your quirk. Izuku could only nod in agreement. Yeah, you too. Hey, Grandma. The start of the question sounded oh so innocent as he squatted down beside her as she plucked, cut, and otherwise pruned her garden. The rain last night had given her a bit of work to do. What is it? She said without looking towards him. Her face was just as hard and firm as when she had scolded him and Ori. Was she still upset with him? If you're going to be talking my ear off, start pulling some weeds. Sure. Which ones are weeds? All of them. Oh. Izuku grabbed a stubborn plant by its stem and yanked, pulling it out with a messy clump of dirt stuck to its insides. A small finger bone was sticking out from the clump like it was a clue to some unsolved mystery show. Bah. Hanabi snatched the bone and looked at it for a moment before she tossed it to the side and dug into the dirt a bit more until she pulled out a bit of soggy white and red cardboard. If you see someone eating KFC around here again, call me so I can kick their damn ass. I knew that this place smelled funny. So that was a chicken bone. Hanabi raised an eyebrow at him and looked him up and down. You didn't think I'd bury a body in my own garden, did you? Kind of. I mean, you are the leader of the Yakuza. That's something that's right out of a TV show. Look, we have better ways to dispose of bodies, especially with quirks these days. Not that I've had to use them in a good long while. But no, I don't keep bodies in my garden. She blinked and then pointed behind her. Well, besides your grandfather's ashes. But those are in the shrine over there if you want to go laugh at him for doing better against Stendhal than he did. Where's Dad's then? Cemetery said he ate enough of my burnt cooking for one life. The idea of being turned to ash wasn't too appealing. She grunted and pulled another stubborn flower out, this time revealing a plastic straw. She mumbled something about killing the next person to eat in her garden. Thought about having him buried somewhere here. Make it easier for me to see him. But I figured your mother would want to pay her respects too. You want to go see him? Maybe some other time. Izuku mumbled and stared at the discarded chicken bones for a few seconds. Why did he feel like that was Tanaka's doing? But I didn't really come here about them. No shit. His grandmother pulled out another weed and tossed it onto a pile oh so casually. You have something on your mind, have had for a while. I can read a lot of things, but a mind isn't one of them. Why are you the leader of the Amaji? He asked, turning his attention to another weed. This was snapped quickly, leaving the root still buried in the dirt. The world's full of shit, Izuku. We just need to try and get through it all smelling as good as possible. Hanabi let out a century-long sigh and sat down on the stone path that wove through her garden. Part of it started as just something I had to do. No one else stepped up and we were aimless, so I did. We could have quit. Everyone that had helped the police was offered amnesty, but I ultimately chose to still keep the Amaji going. I chose this life. And do you know why? Izuku looked at his grandmother for a few seconds while she stared at some plant, like it was her life's goal. No, I don't. Power. That simple word hung in the air for a moment as Hanabi reached her hand out as though to pluck it once it was ripe enough. There's something about power, having it, using it, being able to hold it over people. It's intoxicating. There's a reason why people always covet more of it. Even age doesn't temper this desire. I'm no exception. Sure, I want to see the Amaji restored to our former glory, but that too is driven by my love for power. I want my name to mean something again. She bounced up to her feet and gave him a wide, youthful smile. Or at least something more than whatever file they have at the police station that I'm retired. Huh. Well, if it helps, I think you're a badass. Think. You better know it. Like you best know I can still show you a thing or two. Now come on. You're here and there's a shit ton of weeds left. And we still need to figure out your major. Right? Classes were starting soon. Sure. Izuku nodded and started to diligently pull out the weeds. Even Hisashi crawled out of his sleeve and helped as well as he could. Power, huh? Eat it. Hisashi looked at Izuku with a molten tongue hanging out of its mouth. Its large, smoldering eyes looked both moist and warm to the touch, and with its thick, stubby tail slapping the ground hard enough to send splatters of ink like mud in every direction. The salamander that Izuku had named after his father looked like a large, slimy, muddy, mildly burnt and molten, six-legged puppy. A confused puppy at that. Izuku gestured towards the red-painted rock he had placed in front of Hisashi again. Like you did the sword, come on. Eat it. He was trying to figure out how to get real-world items to turn into tattoos. Or were they tattoos, and they just existed in his skin like Hisashi and Raijin did? All he knew that Hayashi had eaten Stendhal's sword, and now it was doing some poetic shit by resting inside a lotus flower at the base of a waterfall. He wasn't even sure how he could even get it out of there. Unlike when he drew on his arm with a marker, he couldn't just grab the stuff Ori had etched into his skin. It had depth. Raijin and Hisashi came out through their own power. That was another thing he was going to need to figure out. But for right now, just being able to throw stuff into his quirk would be pretty useful. Hisashi tilted his head and looked at the rock with a single eye for a moment before he snapped onto his prey, scooping up the rock into its mouth, and then crunching down, sending chunks of rock all around the yard in a violent display of Hayashi's jaw power. In a few quick crunches, the fist-sized rock was reduced to nothing but a pile of pebbles. And much like any formerly confused puppy, Hisashi looked up at Izuku with all the pride in the world. Izuku let out a sigh and looked over towards Raijin, who was currently in optimal great ape mode, laying down in the sun, head propped up on a single arm and softly scratching his bum while a similar pile of pebbles laid next to him. Raijin didn't even try. He just crushed the rock and sat down. Well, so much for that idea. Still, Hisashi did it once. It could probably do it again if it wanted to. Just not when Izuku wanted to. I'm so bored. Ori let out a long groan. The baggy sweats and baggier sweater combo she had was appealing in its own unique way, as it was abundantly apparent that she at the very least wasn't wearing a bra. I can't ink. I can't draw. Classes start tomorrow, and I just have nothing to do until then. Stupid cast. Like a savage animal confused by its own injury, Ori bit onto the hardened cast that had involved her hand and wrist. Apparently, it had been healing well enough, despite how often Ori acted like it was going to kill her. She should have it off in a week or two. Still, he could hardly blame her for complaining. They had both technically been grounded and restricted to the compound until school started unless Tanaka or Ito was with them. Izuku. Ori pointed at him with her cast. Entertain me. How? Good question. Ori flopped back down onto the porch with a huff. After a moment of contemplation, she suddenly shot her arms straight up into the air. Let's sleep together. Maybe it was the fact that he was still inexperienced, or that he had only ever really crushed on girls before, but Izuku could only manage one response to that proposal. It didn't help that he was moderately, maybe severely attracted to Ori. At least enough that he had thought about her that way, at least once a day. I mean, like you picking me up and pinning me against a wall, she continued bluntly, waving her arm around as if acting out the scene. Or me on top while you hang on for dear life. You get the idea. She stayed flat on her back, gesturing wildly to demonstrate, before giving a full-body shrug and sitting up. Or, just Netflix and chill. Every instinct in his body was screaming yes. But the age-old warning, don't stick your hand in fire, rang loudly in the back of his mind. Why? He asked carefully. Do you actually want to? It's something to do. She flipped her hand dismissively in front of her face. I'm just bored. Honestly, I thought you'd jump at the chance, considering how much you sneak glances at me. I don't. She suddenly lifted her sweater just enough to prove a point, confirming one of his earlier suspicions. For a split second, he caught sight of a bold tribal-style wing tattoo along her sides before she dropped the fabric again and burst into laughter. See, you totally can't help but look. Damn. She had a strong presence. Despite his face turning several shades of red, Izuku stood his ground. That wasn't me sneaking a glance. That was you flashing me. Whatever, she replied with a smirk. Doesn't change the fact that you think I'm sexy. She wasn't wrong. So come on, she said casually. Let's do this. Just like that? Just like that. But, was it really that simple? Izuku's mind raced. This wasn't exactly how he imagined something like this happening. No build-up, no grand confession, no dramatic tension, just Ori casually suggesting they skip straight to the part most people overthink for months. She tilted her head, watching him spiral internally. Well, she pressed. He swallowed. This was Ori. Bold. Unpredictable. completely unfiltered, and somehow completely serious. But he started, struggling to form a coherent thought. Shouldn't there be more to it than that? Her smile softened just slightly. Like what? And just like that, the real conversation was about to begin. Oh, come on, Izuku. What the hell is something casual to a Yakuza? Ori pushed the hair away from her red eye and gave him a smile that was both serene and completely unhinged. That caught him off guard. But I'm not a. Oh, please, you totally are. Your grandma is literally a boss, you've got tattoos, you live in a Yakuza compound, and you sit in on their meetings. Even if it's just a bunch of old guys talking about random stuff. She rolled her eyes and flopped back onto the deck, her sandal barely hanging onto her foot. She kind of had a point. Even if he hadn't committed any real crimes technically, he was allowed to use his quirk in self-defense. He was still far more surrounded by Yakuza than any hero or civilian should be. And honestly, he couldn't even call most of the people he'd met true villains. Sure, Wacken was a jerk, and Tanaka could probably make children cry just by staring at them. But the worst things he'd seen were a few small drug deals, the fight pit, and the casino. But fine, Ori sighed. I get it. You're one of those types who doesn't want anything casual. You want the whole relationship thing, or whatever. She paused, realizing she had hit the nail on the head. So hurry up and figure out how to make me fall in love with you or something. How do I do that? Do I look like someone who practices self-love? She shot back dryly. Well, at least now he knew she was open to the idea of him trying to romance her. Whatever that actually meant. And that if he ever wanted to take things further, all he really had to do was ask at the right moment. Why did he have a sneaking suspicion that being with Ori would be wild, intense, and maybe just a little dangerous? Pain. The pain wouldn't go away. It was like 1,000 needles being used to pull apart his arm skin cell by skin cell. Sleep was impossible without enough meds to kill a weaker man. If it wasn't for the limited control over his own body that his quirk gave him, then he would have been dead a week ago. The pain was sobering in a way. It kept the voices muted. This was all that Yakuza whore's doing. That cut she had made and cauterized in an instant still stung 1,000 times worse than any other wound he had suffered. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual as well, as though she had branded his very soul with her quirk. Worse still was the very nature of the wound itself. Sliding along his arm, the cut was shallow, but it still cut the muscle. And it wouldn't heal. A permanent crevasse of open wound that would not bleed and would not heal ran up and down his arm, limiting his range of motion and making so much as a twitch a lesson in pure agony. Kaizome slammed against the battered wall of the nearly defunct hallway towards the shabby apartment he had made his home. The rent was cheap, the water was cold, and the heat never worked. But that was all he needed. Anything else would be a distraction. With a hiss, he pushed off the wall and stumbled towards his front door. The entire world seemed to revolve around the wound on his arm. It was like swimming in a fishbowl of pain. Stendhal needed to come out. He needed to come out and finish what he started. He needed to kill that Yakuza whore so that this curse she placed upon him would end. And kill that boy too. That boy needed to die. Ribs took forever to heal. While he was stuck here licking his damn wounds, who knew how much the infection in society was spreading? Fake heroes were still alive, preventing the true heroes from stepping forth and choking society. The Yakuza were still there. They did not straddle the line of villains. They were villains. They were dragging society down with them. The fake heroes. The Yakuza. The villains. They should all just die. Stumbling into his apartment, Kaizome slammed the door behind him and made his way towards the bathroom. The bag of over-the-counter pain relievers weren't nearly as strong as something from a hospital, but if he took enough of them, they could work. Something felt off in here. It was hard to tell what. The air tasted strange, and he could hear a slight hissing noise. Was that the drugs? Or danger? He turned just in time to see her. A woman he had met once 10 years ago, the Phoenix. She stood in an elegant-looking kimono that betrayed the hateful glare in her eyes. Gas. He could taste the gas and hear it leaking. He grabbed the chair and tossed it towards the large window that faced the city, shattering it just as he felt the heat of the explosion brush against his back. Even with flames burning his body, That damn scar on his arm still managed to hurt more as he charged for the window, hands covering his face as he tried to make certain that he could live through this. How had she found him? Had he been this sloppy? This damn curse was doing more than causing him pain. The lack of sleep. The lack of rational thinking. He got sloppy. Sloppy. He leapt through the window, the remaining shards of glass scraping against him as he felt the flames burn away what was left of his flesh. Through the pain he fought, pushing it to the side, aside from that damn scar, and targeted the building opposite his own. He had made sure that the roof was low enough that he could jump to it and survive if he ever needed to escape. From there, he could hide again. There was a path in the sewers that he could hide in. For once, his lack of nose would be of help. He landed on the roof and stumbled forward a few steps as his ankle twisted. Then he felt a new pain. A stabbing pain. Right in the heart. Reality came crashing down around him as he saw a short, orange-haired boy in a well-maintained suit standing in front of him, holding a knife that had been expertly inserted between his ribs and right into his heart. The skill to make such a clean cut almost would have been impressive had it not been done to him. Kaizome stumbled back, ready to fall back off into the alleyway between the buildings and to his death. The world was already darkening as his heart beat faster, forcing the knife to cut more and more, tearing his chest to shreds as he used all the strength he had in his quirk to stay alive. The boy grabbed him by the tie, holding him at a finger's length from death. The boy stared at him with a look of indifference that would haunt him for the last of his days. "You were hard to find," the boy said in a monotone voice as he gave a light smile. "Thank you for the game." "Huh? A game?" With a roar, Steiner was it Stendhal? Took over and grabbed the blade from his heart. He was going to force fate's hand and take this kid with him. Then he felt the flames envelop him once more. Even as his body burnt to ash, the only thing he could think of was that damn mark and that Yakuza whore. It hurt worse than death. Sergeant Sae Tatsuma. Sae placed the phone to her ear as she continued to absent-mindedly file the police reports for damages done by a scrimmage between the Amaji and the Tokyo clan. Again, it was hard to take the former Sergeant Shio's lackadaisical attitude towards the Amaji to heart when they had a man like Tanaka in their ranks. One man fought and beat nearly 20 other members of the opposing clan. None were killed, but many had a broken limb or two. The level of restraint he must have shown for that. "Sae, where's Shio?" Even over the phone, Sae recognized that voice she had heard a month ago. The Amaji matriarch. "He retired already. I'm in charge of." "Fine." Hanabi Midoriya's tone felt far too serious for this to be about an old friend. "Stain the hero killer is dead." "What?" She slammed her hand on her desk and stood, drawing a raised eyebrow from those just outside her office. Despite their looks, she was far more concerned about what Hanabi had just said. "How?" There was a long pause before Hanabi spoke again. "Retribution." "Oh." It took her a moment to process. "Oh, I see. Well, is there a body or—" "Only ashes." Hanabi's cold voice sounded almost happy about that statement. "Since this benefits both of us, I expect this won't cause any problems?" Sae opened her mouth and found that her throat had dried out in a matter of seconds. How was she supposed to handle this? Stain had killed numerous heroes. He was a menace, and far more concerning than any activity the Amaji had been up to. And for the Amaji to just casually call and claim that they took him out? She was starting to hate her former CO for leaving her right when the Amaji were about to start acting up again. "I'll try to make sure it won't, ma'am," Sae said, uncertainty bubbling up in her voice. "See that you do." "Ori." "Neon." What kind of noise was that? "Ori, get up, it's the first day of class." Izuku sighed and stared at the lump of a woman that was half buried under a dozen pillows and blankets. He honestly couldn't tell how much clothes she had on, but judging by the bare hip he could see rising out of tangled mass of fabrics, he was going to go with not enough. If he wasn't in a hurry, he'd be more inclined to take a moment and just appreciate that curve for a moment. "You're the one that told me to wake you up." "With bacon." She kicked her leg, and for a brief moment, Izuku saw everything. At this point, he was pretty sure he had seen every part of Ori's naked body, just not all at the same time. "Guh, why the hell do they have to have class so early in the morning?" "It's 10, Your first class is at 11. Probably because the art teachers were a bit like Ori, must be a creative thing. Or maybe it was just a common fault in beautiful, busty women that they couldn't get out of bed at a reasonable time. And you woke up before the sun came up because you were inspired at least twice. Ori moaned and pushed up off of her bed. Her long silver hair was tied into a simple yet elegant braid that was looped around each of her horns once. While it was incredibly practical, made her look like a goofball, which she was, a goofball with two great big goofy balls sitting on her chest. Izuku let out a sigh and scratched the back of his head. Normally, he'd randomly look at Ori and think she was incredibly beautiful, especially when he could see both of her eyes, but mornings just didn't seem to get along with her. Maybe that was why her sleep schedule was such a mess. Izuku stepped outside of Ori's house and was greeted by Sho standing there, for once not dressed in his usual crisp black suit. Instead, the shorter, orange-haired man had a casual white shirt, black pants with an orange stripe, a black and orange cap, and even a computer bag that had some kind of a bird on it. "Yo, honorable grandson." Sho winked and placed a single hand in front of his face as he gave a light bow. "Are you and the would-be princess ready to head out?" "Sho, what? Are you coming with us?" Izuku let out a sigh. "Look, I get that grandma wants to protect us, but..." "Oh, I'm not going there to protect you." Sho bounced up onto his heels and dangled a set of keys in front of Izuku. "You guys are just hitching a ride as I go to my own classes." Sho pocketed the keys and gave Izuku a wide smile. "What? Did you two think you and Ori were the only Yakuza to get into Tokyo U?" Izuku felt his cheeks burn at that accusation. "Not really. I just didn't expect you to be a student too. What do you major in?" "Law." Sho gave a light shrug. "Someone has to keep you guys out of trouble, and I've been doing that my whole life, so it's nothing new." "But," Izuku opened his mouth and closed it again. "I never see you studying, and you're always doing stuff. How do you have the time for that?" Sho gave a sly wink. "Besides being a genuine smartass, emphasis on both the ass and the smart parts? It's my quirk." "Your quirk makes you good at law?" No, nothing like that." Sho placed both hands behind his head and leaned against the wall. "I'm surprised you haven't asked until now, but my quirk is officially called restless. It's what the doctors said when my aunt couldn't get me to go to bed as a toddler or even nap. They like to say it's that I don't need sleep." Izuku adjusted his own bag that had been digging into his shoulders for a while now. Today was by far his most stacked day with a total of 4 classes, and that meant 4 books he'd need to carry around the university, plus his laptop. But it's not that simple, is it? "Are quirks ever that simple?" Sho gave a sly smile. "Since you are who you are, I figure there's no reason not to tell you. My quirk's name is rather literal. I can't rest. My body and my mind are always at 100%, and do you know what that means? You never need to sleep? That's part of it. But come on, think about it. When else do you need a rest?" Sho's smile crept higher on his face as he stared at Izuku, his plain eyes taking on a bit of crazy. "After you run, you need a rest. Focus too much, and you need to rest. I can't do that. I can run at full sprint and never get tired. I can spend hours focusing on one thing and not need to rest." "So you can't ever relax?" "Oh, I can. I just don't need to." Sho gave a great big smile and leaned to the side. The sound of Ori stumbling out from her house looking like the exact definition of a hot mess ended their conversation. The loose, sleeveless black blouse she had on looked like she had robbed someone's curtains and attempted to fashion a shirt out of them. The shirt hung halfway down her thigh, which matched lengths with the shorts she had put on. Not that her legs were entirely exposed, as she had on a pair of tights that only left an inch or so of her thighs exposed. "Yo, princess." Sho gave a mock salute. "Did you sleep in your laundry again?" Ori let out a groan and glared at Sho for a moment. "Piss off, shorty." Hi. All right, kiddies, come on now. We gotta go to the big kid college so you two can actually be worth something to society." The wide Cheshire grin spread across Sho's face filled the air with enough mirth that Izuku could choke on it. Beyond the general education classes he had taken, Izuku was also dabbling in several majors to see what grabbed his attention. Business management felt like just the generic safe thing to major in and live a decent life. Criminal investigation would help if he wanted to become a hero later on. Law was just plain ambitious. Finally, he was also looking into political science, because apparently getting elected with Yakuza backing was actually that easy. Individually, all of those would make his mother proud and have her calling all of her friends to talk about how her son was going to be an entrepreneur, investigator, lawyer, or politician. But together, with what he knew of his grandmother, he couldn't help but see her trying to nudge him down a path that would benefit her and the Amagi. In a way, she was trying to manipulate him, but she was doing it in a way that made sense to him, and she wasn't forcing him. She was simply offering him paths to go down after he refused the path his mother wanted. Still, it felt like it was going to be a bit much. Even if it was just the introduction course to each field, what the hell was he thinking taking all of them at once? Especially since they were all 2 days a week, and on the same days. Maybe not going to school for a month and a half had made him lazy, and the idea of actually working was now revolting to him, despite his grandmother, Wacken, Tanaka, and Ori, especially Ori, making certain that he never actually had free time that wasn't at least mildly constructive. Like getting inked, going to the fight pit, or getting his shit pushed in by the torture that was Wacken's training. Still, he was grateful for the change of pace. His first 3 classes were all back-to-back: business management, then criminal investigation, then law, and then he'd have a few hours until his political science class. The time was long enough to study and eat, but not enough time to actually go back to the compound and actually relax. So about 10 hours at the campus, once it was all said and done. Twice a week. Why did he agree to this again? The business class had been what he expected it to be. Even with a professor that was a red-haired bombshell that was more than just eye candy, the course was just inherently boring. Criminal investigation was the exact opposite, an interesting subject presented by someone that made vending machines seem like they had a personality. Izuku paused as he headed into his 3rd class for the day. Law was hopefully going to be somewhere in between the last 2 classes. He turned to look at one of his classmates running up towards the door. Izuku recognized him from his first 2 classes, with the guy sitting in front of him in one class and Izuku holding the door open for him for the 2nd class. With wild purple hair and a look that could make Sho need a nap, the slender man looked like he was about 2 seconds away from shouting several conspiracy theories at whoever would listen. Matching his unkempt hair, the once well-kept dress shirt and pants combo he wore had quickly deteriorated into slob territory, with only about half of the dull yellow shirt being tucked into his black slacks. "We meet again." Izuku smiled and held the door open for his classmate a bit wider. His classmate looked slightly out of breath. Maybe he wasn't really the active type. His classmate narrowed his eyes for a moment before he shook his head and sighed into a smile. "Yeah, nice to meet someone else that has the same fucked up schedule I do." Izuku laughed and joined this classmate as they walked in. "Next thing you'll tell me you have political science in a couple of hours." His classmate stopped and turned to look at Izuku for a moment. His purple eyes narrowed like Izuku was treading on dangerous ground. Then after a moment he shook his head again and smiled. "I do." "Really?" Izuku asked. His classmate nodded again. "Oh." Izuku blinked and then extended his hand. "Well, I'm Izuku Midoriya. What do you say we get some lunch after this? It'd be nice to have the same study partner for all 4 classes." Hitoshi Shinso. Hitoshi grabbed his hand with a slightly limp grip. "And yeah, just don't expect me to do all the work." "Are you actually going to eat all of that?" Izuku looked at Hitoshi's rather modest tray of food and then towards his own virtual mountain of food that he had every intent of eating. The fact that he was nearly as tall as Ori and had a bit more definition was all the signs he needed that Ori wasn't completely full of shit. While he did have some muscles from what training he could get in while studying, he now had more definition. Hopefully he would still be human-sized by the time he was done growing. Yeah, I've been having a growth spurt." Hitoshi gave him a dull look and pointed a finger towards him. "You are like 18, right?" "I will be this summer, but I just graduated high school." "You?" Izuku sat across from Hitoshi, who was currently holding his head up, a few fingers digging into his light purple hair. He looked like he needed an IV drip of the world's strongest espresso. "I turn 18 in July." Izuku blinked and stared at Hitoshi again. "Well, that's just another thing we have in common, I guess. Mine's July 15th. "Huh, I'm the first." A sly smile crept up Hitoshi's face as he started to poke at his food. "I guess that makes me your senior." "What? Do you want me to call you senpai for being born 2 weeks earlier?" Maybe boss would work too, but tell me, what's with your class schedule? I'd be worried you were sent to follow me or something, but I'm not worth following. Hitoshi took a casual bite of his food like he was a deer simply grazing. Besides, it'd be pretty stupid to have you in every one of my classes. Izuku had to pause as he swallowed his food. He hadn't even considered the fact that someone would be following him. He did meet SAE a while ago, so maybe they were keeping tabs on him? Not that there was any reason for him to hide anything. As far as he was aware, the most illegal thing he'd done was go to the fight pit once or twice, and apparently that place was police-sanctioned. Besides, who would want to follow him? He was just some kid that failed to get into UA. Well, I did want to be a hero, Izuku said slowly and stared at his food. Still kind of do, but I ended up failing the entrance exam because my quirk wasn't too effective against the robots. He shrugged and gestured around him. And well, my mom wanted me to go to Tokyo U. So here I am, living the dream. Honestly, Hitoshi leaned back into his chair, same. Huh. I tried to get into UA too, and yeah, my quirk can't do anything against robots, so I failed. Hitoshi paused for a moment too. I was also lazy and didn't really train as much as I should have, so I failed the physical portion as well. He let out a sigh that Izuku felt in his soul. I did get into the general course, but if I was doing that, Tokyo U would be a better school for me. Why is it the more we talk, the more we have in common? Hitoshi just shrugged. So what was your quirk? Obviously, you felt like you could be a hero with it, so why'd it not work against the robots? I can make art drawn on me come to life. He scratched the back of his head and let out a sigh. As cool as that sounds, the only option I really had was to use those fake kitty tattoos that we used to get at birthday parties. Mostly because my mom wouldn't let me get a tattoo. Would that have made a difference? Izuku smiled. Yeah, it would have. The more detailed and more permanent the art, the stronger it is, so a tattoo would have made a huge difference. Maybe if they became actual friends, Izuku would show off to Hitoshi, but at this point, outside of the Amagi and other Yakuza groups, having a tattoo was still taboo and technically still illegal for him to get. Just because his mother couldn't claim custody over him did not mean he was completely free. The laws, even the bullshit ones, were still laws. He was going to have to wear long-sleeved shirts during the summer, wasn't he? Shame. That sounds like it would have been a powerful quirk. Are you planning on going through Tokyo U to get your license later? Hitoshi asked, still munching away at his food. Izuku could only shrug. He honestly didn't know at this point. I'm not sure, but maybe. My schedule is basically I don't know what I want to do with my life, so let's take a bunch of stuff and see what sticks. What about you? Aside from having Hello Kitty pop off my arm to fight criminals, it's pretty much the same, Hitoshi mumbled into his plate, his tired eyes locked with Izuku's. Though for me, there's some extra life stuff that's trying to push me in a dozen ways at once. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to be doing. And your quirk? A sly smile crept up Hitoshi's face as he finished the last bite of his food. It's called brainwashing. I can basically control someone's body, but I can only give them simple commands, nothing that really takes too much brain power. That sounds like an amazing quirk. Izuku smiled and started to clean up his own plate as well. I mean, you could just tell a villain to stop and they'd stop doing bullshit. Kind of pisses me off that UA would just let you go. I mean, they must have known your quirk was strong even if it doesn't work on robots. Hitoshi's eyes widened and he smiled at Izuku. You're the first person that hasn't told me I have a villain's quirk. I think we're going to get along just fine as study partners. Izuku nodded and extended his hand. Same, I can use someone sane in my life for once. Laughter escaped Hitoshi as he took Izuku's hand. Likewise. Daw, that's cute. Ori's usually calm voice that always sounded like she was teasing him nearly made him jump out of his skin when he saw her standing behind her with a great big goofy smile on her face. Her hair was pulled into a braided bun that was held in place by a paintbrush, and the formerly pristine surface of her cast now had 12.5 doodles on it. Are you two like BFFs now? Ugh. Hitoshi looked Ori up and down, then looked back towards Izuku, and a grin that could match Ori's smugness pound for pound grew on his face like a rancid mold. This your girlfriend or something? He's still trying to figure that part out. Ori beamed and wrapped her arm around Izuku's shoulder. Isn't that right, Izuku? Clearly Hitoshi thought he was teasing Ori right back, But he was not aware of Ori's infinite stack of Uno reverse cards she kept between her tits, mostly debating if all your crazy is worth it. You've seen my tits, I am. Point. All right. Well, before this gets any more off track, Hitoshi, this is Ori. She's my friend. He guessed. Really, it was hard to define what Ori was to him, to a normal person. She's older than us and an art student. Ori, this is Hitoshi, he's in my class. All of them. Really? Ori looked between them and crinkled her nose up. That's weird. I didn't think anyone was as crazy as you in show, but I guess if it happens twice. Anyways, Izuku leaned back and looked Ori in her lone exposed blue eye. What's up? Were you looking for me? Oh, that's right. First, check your phone more often. What's the point of having a cute girl's number if you just ignore her? Ori poked him in the chest. And second, you remember that Stain guy that almost killed us a while ago? Wait, what? Hitoshi's eyes went wide. You guys met Stain? Yeah. Ori waved her cast at him. Apparently Endeavor dealt with him. They're having a press conference about it now. Dealing with Endeavor was, in many ways, worse than dealing with the Amagi. She had at least physically seen Hanabi smile, but Endeavor just had this annoyed expression that he was having to clean up someone else's mess, even though most heroes would have been happy to get some kind of extra coverage, especially for dealing with a high-priority target like Stain. The fact that Stain had been burnt to a pile of ashes that they could barely get a DNA sample of hadn't made things any easier. SAE let out a nervous squeak as she watched Endeavor take to the podium. The police chief had just introduced him, and now it was time for the hero's remarks. The choice to give Endeavor credit was simple. Among all active heroes in Tokyo, he was the only prominent one with a fire-based quirk. But now, he was going to be labeled as someone that took justice too far. I would like to say I acted as a hero. Endeavor growled, the speech they had collaborated on crushed against the side of the podium as he gripped it with all his strength. But the simple answer is I was not. I was off duty when he attacked me. I fended off his attack and fought back. Ultimately, I was left with a choice. Let Stain escape and risk letting him kill again, or take one life to save countless more. Endeavor let out a flame-filled breath and glared at the camera. I chose the latter. Cameras flashed and reporters buzzed. A pro hero had taken a life. It wasn't common, though it did happen from time to time, but for someone in the top 10 to do so was exceptionally rare. Essie bit her lip as she recalled her most recent sleepless night, in no small part due to this incident. Endeavor was a frightening man, more force of nature than actual human, and she could understand his frustration. He didn't want false credit. He didn't want to admit to doing something he didn't do. He didn't want to be part of some police cover-up. But, at the end of the day, he agreed, for more reasons than she would care to admit. Part of being the police liaison with the Amagi was knowing who they were. She could still remember the shock she felt when she saw that report, when she saw that name. Hanabi Todoroki, Endeavor's aunt. The weeks following Stain's demise were calm, peaceful, and bright. It really felt like with the legendary hero killer dealt with, there were no more legends, no more martyrs for the villains of Japan to rally against. Each and every day, the crime rate dropped, but his grandmother hadn't been convinced. Apparently, villains weren't so simple to get rid of. Sure, a show of force could shut them up for a while, but the idea that they had power and that they could use it to make their life better was deeply entwined with every single quirk out there. In a single